Chapter 2762. The Inner City. On a secluded street, Lu Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and said, "Uncle, why don't you teach him a lesson?" "It's not time yet." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Lu Xiaofei asked, "Then when is tomorrow morning?" Before Lu Xiaofei finished, Qin Feiyang spoke. "Tomorrow morning?" Lu Xiaofei and Lu Xiaojia looked at each other. This uncle's thoughts were really unpredictable. "Xiaofei, are you familiar with the Imperial Palace?" Qin Feiyang suddenly stopped and asked. "Of course. Not only am I familiar with the Imperial Palace, but I'm also familiar with the people in the Imperial Palace." Lu Xiaofei nodded. Qin Feiyang said, "Then tell me, what kind of conduct do these younger brothers and sisters of mine have?" This, Lu Xiaofei was a little hesitant. "Just say it." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Well, I'll be frank. Except for those princesses, all the princes are fighting openly and secretly, and all of this is nothing more than the throne and full strength." Lu Xiaofei said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Father and mother don't care about this kind of thing." "Yes, of course. But these people are one thing on the surface and another behind the scenes. Grandfather and grandmother can't do anything. Besides, these princes are like you, their biological children. They can't bear to be strict with them. So, as long as they don't go too far, grandfather and grandmother will turn a blind eye." Lu Xiaofei said, "How can this be? This situation is no different from when we were in the Great Qin." White-Eyed Wolf said, "Yes, to put it bluntly, they have been pampered and have not experienced any hardships, so they have developed such selfish behavior." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Then, how do you plan to solve it?" White-Eyed Wolf asked. "Just as Little Fei said, they're my blood brothers and sisters after all. I can't just kill them." Qin Feiyang sighed. "Compared to the first prince and the others, it is indeed a little difficult to deal with." The White-Eyed Wolf nodded. Qin Feiyang then looked at Lu Xiaofei and asked, "What about the various martial marquis?" Qin Feiyang said, "The various martial marquises also have their own camps. These people are still not being honest." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "That's because you left. If you stayed in the Imperial Palace, would they dare to act rashly?" White-Eyed Wolf's face was full of disdain. "That's true. These martial marquis, every time they hear your name, uncle, it's like a mouse seeing a cat." Lu Xiaofei smiled. Qin Feiyang glanced at Lu Xiaofei, pondered for a moment, and said with a faint smile, "All right, I already know how to deal with it." The next day, early morning, the civil and military officials gathered in the throne room for the daily morning assembly. Swish! A middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe and a dragon crown descended in front of the dragon throne. That's right. This person was the current emperor, Qin Feiyang's father. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The civil and military officials immediately lined up and respectfully knelt on the ground. The emperor sat on the dragon throne and said lightly, "Rise." Everyone stood up. The chief eunuch next to him shouted, "If there's something to report, leave the assembly." "Your Majesty, I have something to report." A middle-aged man immediately walked out. "Yang Wuho, what's the matter?" The emperor said, "Your Majesty, last night in the first district, a few criminals openly attacked and injured my son, and they threatened that they would even dare to beat up the princess and the prince." Yang Wuho said angrily, "What? They even dare to beat up the princess and the prince? Who is so bold?" As soon as Yang Wuho said this, the civil and military officials suddenly became restless. "Is there really such a thing?" The emperor frowned. "Yes. At that time the 16th prince was also there." Yang Wuho said. The emperor looked at the chief eunuch next to him and said, "Call the 16th prince over." "Yes." The chief eunuch responded respectfully. Then he disappeared in a flash. Soon, the chief eunuch took Qin Li back to the throne room. Qin Li knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "This son greets father. Get up and talk." The emperor waved his hand. "Thank you, father." Qin Li bowed and gave his thanks before standing up. The emperor said, "I heard from Yang Wuho that someone beat his son last night." "Yes. Those people are extremely arrogant and even threaten to beat us princes and princesses. This son has issued a warrant. I believe it won't be long before they are caught." Qin Li said. "Warrant?" The emperor was slightly stunned and frowned. "Why didn't you ask me first for such a big thing like a warrant?" "Father, please calm down. This son was also afraid that they would run away, so I made the decision on my own. This son was also planning to report this matter to father after the morning assembly." Qin Li hurriedly said. The emperor said, "Only I am qualified to issue a warrant for arrest in the Great Qin. Next time, don't act on your own." This son obeys the decree. Qin Li nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Since the warrant has been issued, then let's wait for the news. Is there anything else?" "If there's nothing else, then you can leave," the emperor said indifferently. I still have something to do." As soon as the emperor finished speaking, a calm voice suddenly sounded outside the hall. Everyone was stunned and hurriedly turned their heads to look. This voice was very unfamiliar, but there was a trace of surprise in Qin Li's eyes, because this voice was very familiar to him. It was the person who shouted at him. But why would this person appear outside the throne room? One had to know. This throne room was the holy land of the imperial palace. Other than the civil and military officials, even princes like them had to obtain the emperor's permission in advance before they could enter. At the same time, outside the hall there were 8 guards. These 8 people all had the cultivation of the war emperor. They wore a set of flame armor and looked majestic. On their armor there was a Qilin pattern. They were the Kirin army, which was of a higher level than the invincible Black army. The 8 members of the Qilin army were surprised when they heard the unfamiliar voice. Whoosh! In the next moment, 3 people and a dog appeared in front of the throne room. "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the throne room?" The 8 people immediately took out their weapons and pointed at the 3 people and the dog. The 3 people and the dog were naturally Qin Feiyang, the white-eyed wolf, and Lu Xiaofei. Qin Feiyang glanced at the 8 people indifferently and stepped into the throne room with the white-eyed wolf and Lu Xiaofei. So fast! The 8 people were shocked and quickly chased into the throne room. They shouted, "Those who trespass into the throne room die. Make them pout." Qin Feiyang glanced at the white-eyed wolf. The white-eyed wolf grinned and waved its paw. The 8 people immediately flew out of the throne room and rolled on the ground. They were in a sorry state. So strong! Seeing this scene, not only the civil and military officials, but also the emperor was shocked. "Father, it's them." Qin Li immediately ran to the emperor and said, "Yes, your majesty, it's them who injured my son." Yang Wuho also angrily pointed at Qin Feiyang and the others. Qin Feiyang glanced at the emperor, then turned to Yang Wuho and asked, "You're Yang Xiaochuan's father?" "That's right." Yang Wuho nodded. "I was just about to look for you, but you jumped out yourself." Qin Feiyang said indifferently and looked at the white-eyed wolf. "Give him a slap." Slap. The white-eyed wolf took a step forward and slapped Yang Wuho's face with its paw. Yang Wuho wanted to dodge, but found that he couldn't. The opponent's speed was so fast that he couldn't catch it. Bang! Immediately, Yang Wuho also fell to the ground. His teeth also fell to the ground and blood flowed out. "Impudent! How dare you beat up the martial marquis in the throne room?" "Men, take him down!" the head eunuch shouted. The 8 Kirin army ran in again, but they surrounded Qin Feiyang and the others and didn't dare to make a move. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the head eunuch. After so many years, the head eunuch still hasn't changed. "Who are you? Why did you speak so arrogantly last night, and why did you force your way into the throne room today? The emperor looked down at Qin Feiyang, and an emperor's aura gradually filled the air. Qin Feiyang looked at the emperor with a smile in his eyes and was about to speak. Qin Li took the lead and said, "Father, why are you talking nonsense with such a crazy person? Just behead him." "Behead me?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Yes, offending the bloodline of the Qin family is a capital offense." Qin Li nodded and stared coldly at Qin Feiyang. "Offending is a capital offense?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and frowned. "How come I didn't know there was such a rule?" Qin Li said disdainfully, "Who do you think you are to know?" "Who do I think I am?" Qin Feiyang muttered. He suddenly raised his arm and made a grabbing motion in the air. Qin Li immediately cried out in surprise and flew uncontrollably towards Qin Feiyang. "You dare to attack His Highness?" The civil and military officials were shocked. The eyes of the emperor, who was sitting at the top, were also filled with anger. "I advise you all to sit down obediently. Otherwise, if things get out of hand, there will be no way to clean up the mess," White-Eyed Wolf said lightly. At the same time, Qin Li flew in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed his neck and said, "The Qin clan has a descendant like you. It's really sad." His eyes flashed with a strong murderous intent. Seeing this, Lu Xiaofei hurriedly transmitted his voice. "Uncle, you have to calm down." Qin Feiyang glanced at him and looked at Qin Li again. At this moment, Qin Li's face was full of fear. Not to mention other things, Qin Feiyang's murderous eyes made him feel despair. "Humph!" Suddenly, Qin Feiyang coldly snorted and casually threw Qin Li away. Qin Li immediately flew out and hit a stone pillar next to him. He immediately felt dizzy and blood gushed out. "It seems that you really don't have the heart to do it." White-Eyed Wolf shook his head. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. He glanced at the civil and military officials, who were silent like cicadas in winter, and walked towards the emperor step by step. "What do you want to do?" "Quickly protect the emperor. Protect the emperor." The chief eunuch stood in front of the emperor and shouted at the 8 Kirin army. Seeing this, the 8 Kirin army braced themselves and charged towards Qin Feiyang. However, they were sent flying by the White-Eyed Wolf's claw. Swish! Suddenly, a figure descended in front of the emperor. It was a middle-aged man who exuded an extremely powerful aura. Qin Feiyang was stunned. This figure wasn't Li Jian? Back then, Li Jian and Zhou Zheng followed Qin Feiyang together, but later Zhou Zheng was killed. And during the battle with the demon ancestor, Li Jian also made a great contribution. Back then, when Qin Feiyang went to the ancient world, Li Jian chose to stay in the Great Qin. But he didn't expect this guy to stay in the imperial palace. And now his cultivation is also at the early stage of War God. Chapter 2763. Qin Feiyang still had a deep impression of Li Jian, because the first person to comprehend the mysteries of becoming a god was Li Jian. Now that Li Jian stayed in the imperial palace, he was undoubtedly the guardian of the great Qin Empire. However, Qin Feiyang felt a little regretful about Zhou Zheng's death. It was not because Zhou Zheng was powerful, but because Zhou Zheng and Li Jian were good friends. The reason why Li Jian worked so hard was to avenge Zhou Zheng. "Uncle Jian, kill him!" Whether it was the civil and military officials or the chief eunuch, they were all relieved when they saw Li Jian. Qin Li even immediately roared, "The Qin clan is not something you can offend." Li Jian stepped forward and stared at Qin Feiyang with murderous intent in his eyes. "Then why are you protecting the Qin clan?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Because of one person." Li Jian said, "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded. Needless to say, the person Li Jian was talking about was him. In other words, it was because of him that Li Jian stayed in the Qin clan to protect the Qin clan. Boom! In the next moment, Li Jian slammed his palm toward Qin Feiyang, but he did not use his divine power, because once he did, it would affect everyone in the imperial palace. Although your cultivation has improved a lot over the past few hundred years, you are still no match for me. Qin Feiyang shook his head, raised his arm, and pointed his index finger at Li Jian's palm. Immediately, Li Jian's arm stopped in midair, unable to move an inch. What? Li Jian's expression changed. He blocked his palm with a single finger? Furthermore, it had completely nullified the power of his palm strike. What kind of power was this? What kind of technique was this? The emperor and the others were also dumbfounded. As one of the guardians of the great Qin Empire, he could not even do anything to a single finger? How big was the gap between their strength? Don't be presumptuous. Suddenly, along with a shout, another 4 figures rushed into the throne room. Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf looked over, and a smile flashed in their eyes. They were all old acquaintances. Actually, it was an old man. It was Elder Qin, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. This old man was the true protector of Great Qin, because he had always taken it upon himself to protect Great Qin, and whether it was in the past or now, that had never changed. Once, he went to the spiritual state alone and fought against the mermaid clan. The other 3 people were the Qin Sheng trio, who had been living in seclusion in the back mountain. After a few hundred years, the 3 of them seemed to have been reborn, looking hale and hearty. All of this came from their cultivation bases. In the past, when they were nearing the end of their lifespans, they had always been in a state of self-sealing, which was why they looked old and senile. But now, they had all broken through to the initial stage of the war god realm, and their lifespans had been extended. Whether it was his body or his mind, he had become completely different from before. Great Qin's 5 guardian gods have all arrived. Brat, prepare to die. Yang Wuho stared at Qin Feiyang and roared. 5 guardian gods, quite awe-inspiring. The white-eyed wolf chuckled. At the same time, Li Jian, Elder Qin, and Qin Sheng looked at each other and charged towards Qin Feiyang at the same time. Uncle Wolf, the Lu siblings were a little nervous. Of course, they knew the strength of Li Jian and the other 4. They were all the top experts of Great Qin. It seems that you still don't understand the difference between the 9th Heaven Realm and the War God Realm. Not to mention the 5 of them. Even if there were 10,000 of them, they would only be killed in an instant. The white-eyed wolf transmitted his voice. Even 10,000 of them can be killed in an instant? The siblings were shocked. Was the difference between the 9th Heaven Realm and the War God Realm really so big? In the blink of an eye, Li Jian and the other 4 had already arrived in front of Qin Feiyang. The surrounding civil and military officials all thought that Qin Feiyang would dodge or even escape, especially Qin Li, whose face was full of a cold smile. But Qin Feiyang had no intention of dodging at all. He slowly raised his arm and pointed his finger. Li Jian defeated. Another finger lightly tapped forward, and Old Man Qin was defeated. Qin Sheng defeated. The other 2 were also defeated one after another. In front of Qin Feiyang, the 5 of them had no power to fight back at all. One must know, Qin Feiyang didn't even use 1/10,000th of his strength. Strong. The Lu siblings' hearts trembled. This was their uncle's strength. It was too powerful, simply invincible. Looking at the civil and military officials, the chief eunuch, Qin Li, everyone's eyes were wide open, full of disbelief. The 5 guardians were defeated so easily. The emperor's heart also sank. When did such a terrifying expert appear in the Great Qin? Needless to say, Li Jian and the other 4, having personally experienced Qin Feiyang's strength, they knew how terrifying Qin Feiyang's strength was. It was no exaggeration to say that if Qin Feiyang wanted to kill them, it would be as simple as crushing an ant. Greetings, Senior. The 5 of them looked at each other and bowed together. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He also bowed and said, "I can't accept this. Instead, I should thank you." Huh. The 5 of them were shocked. What did he mean? "Thank you for protecting the great Qin for me." Qin Feiyong bowed. What? The 5 of them looked at Qin Feiyong in surprise. The emperor, the chief eunuch, the civil and military officials, and Qin Li also looked at Qin Feiyong in confusion. Protect the great Qin for him? This person must be stupid. Qin Feiyong took a deep breath, looked up at the emperor, and knelt on the ground with a plop. He said, "Unfilial son Qin Feiyong greets father." What? Unfilial son Qin Feiyong. Then isn't he? The eyes of the people in the hall suddenly trembled. In their minds, a figure appeared at the same time. Although hundreds of years had passed, the civil and military officials had not changed. After all, they were all cultivators. Although their cultivation was weaker, it was not a problem for them to live for thousands of years. Therefore, the people in the hall, except for Qin Li and Lu Xiaofei, had all witnessed the rise of Qin Feiyong with their own eyes. Naturally, they knew more about Qin Feiyong's means than Qin Li and Lu Xiaofei. Feiyong, the emperor's eyes also trembled slightly as he looked at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong took out a facial restoration pill and put it in his mouth. Soon, his true appearance was restored. Feiyong, the emperor's body suddenly stiffened. Li Jian and the other 5 also looked at Qin Feiyong's face in a daze. This face, subordinate Li Jian greets young lord. The next moment, Li Jian knelt on one knee, lowered his head and said respectfully, "Da-da," although her tone was sonorous and forceful. There were still drops of tears dripping onto the ground. "Welcome back, your highness." Old Qin and the other 2 came back to their senses and knelt on one knee, crying tears of joy. "Young lord!" "Your highness!" The civil and military officials looked at Li Jian, Old Qin, and the other 3 in shock. Qin Li did not know, but they knew that the young lord that Li Jian mentioned was only one person. Qin Feiyong. There was only one person who could make Old Qin and the other 3 kneel on one knee and respectfully call him your highness. Qin Feiyong. Is it really him? The civil and military officials looked at Qin Feiyong's back and wanted to go forward to confirm, but no one dared to take a step forward. Qin Feiyong. At this moment, Qin Li was also in a state of confusion. He did not expect that this person was actually his biological brother. He could not help but panic in his heart. Although he was very unfamiliar with this big brother of his, he had heard rumors about this big brother of his since he was a child. The emperor also finally came back to his senses and hurriedly walked to Qin Feiyong, squatted on the ground, and looked at Qin Feiyong's face. It really was this child. He's back at this moment. The emperor could not help but roar in his heart, and tears welled up in his eyes. He quickly reached out and pulled Qin Feiyong, saying, "Child, get up. Let me take a good look at you." "Father!" Qin Feiyong slowly got up and looked at his father's face. "It really is my son." Except for his cultivation, he's still the same as before. There's no change at all. The emperor looked at Qin Feiyong for a moment and hugged him tightly. It really is him. Yang Wuho looked at this scene and collapsed on the ground, his face full of horror. This unfilial son of all people had to provoke this man? Was this man someone small characters like them could afford to offend? Although Marquis Wu had supreme status and authority in the great Qin Empire, in front of Qin Feiyong, all of this was nothing. Wuho! In front of this man, as long as he said a word, he would be instantly destroyed. Cough, cough! The head eunuch looked at Qin Feiyong, walked to the front of the emperor, and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, Wuho and the ministers are still here." Ah, the emperor was slightly stunned. Looking at the civil and military officials below, he was so excited that he forgot about these people. "What are you all still doing here?" The emperor let go of Qin Feiyong and looked at the group of people with a frown. How insensible! Didn't you see the father and son reunion? Still standing there, ruining the atmosphere. Yes, yes, yes. We will take our leave. The civil and military officials also reacted, hurriedly bowed, and then turned to leave. Wait, Qin Feiyang suddenly spoke. The civil and military officials' bodies stiffened, and they turned to face Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang also turned to look at the group of people. It's him, it's him. At that moment, everyone lowered their heads, silent like cicadas in winter. When Qin Li saw Qin Feiyang's face, his body trembled violently. He hurriedly stepped forward and said, Qin Li greets. Stop. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Seeing this, Qin Li looked even more flustered. Qin Feiyang said, I am not qualified to be your brother. I'm sorry. Qin Li hurriedly lowered his head, his face pale. The emperor looked at Qin Li, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said, Feiyang, this should be just a misunderstanding. Father, yesterday morning, I had already returned to the imperial city. But do you know why I did not return to the imperial palace immediately? Qin Feiyang said. Why? The emperor was suspicious. Qin Feiyang was about to speak, but seeing Li Jian and the others still kneeling on the ground, he smiled and said, Get up quickly. Yes. The 5 of them responded, got up, and looked at Qin Feiyang, their faces full of smiles. I have to deal with some things first. We can catch up later. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Go ahead. Old Qin smiled slightly. Qin Feiyang looked at the emperor and said, I did not return to the imperial palace immediately. I just wanted to see how the great Qin Empire has changed after hundreds of years. Is it as good as I imagined? The emperor nodded in realization and asked, What's the result? Chapter 2764. In the end, Qin Feiyang murmured. He looked down at the officials and shouted, In the end, I am very disappointed. The officials, who had always been high and mighty, did not even dare to breathe loudly at this moment. Qin Feiyang said, I believe that everyone here knows about the calamity that happened a few hundred years ago. Everyone was silent. Qin Feiyang said, If your memory is too bad, I can help you recall. No need, no need. We all remember, we all remember. Everyone hurriedly spoke. The great Qin Empire was protected by my friends and brothers with our lives. Otherwise, would you still have the chance to live like a prince? Qin Feiyang shouted, Yes, Your Highness' contribution to the great Qin Empire will always be remembered in our hearts. We have always been grateful to Your Highness and to everyone in that battle. One of the marquises said, Do I look like an idiot to you? Qin Feiyang looked at that marquis. Your Highness, please forgive us. That marquis quickly knelt on the ground. If you were truly grateful, would you have secretly formed factions? If you were truly grateful, would you have helped the princes fight for fame and fortune? This is how you repay me? Qin Feiyang shouted. Plop! Upon hearing these words, all of the officials fell to their knees in fear. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Li and shouted, And you kneel. Qin Li's gaze trembled, and he could not help but look at the emperor. The emperor looked at Qin Li and sighed inwardly. From now on, everything will be decided by Qin Feiyang. The meaning of this sentence was very clear. Whoever did not listen would be defying the emperor's authority. Qin Li's face became paler and paler as he knelt on the ground powerlessly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Qin Li, then swept his gaze over the civil and military officials. I originally thought that after that calamity, the people of the great Qin Empire would put aside their selfish desires and truly unite. But now it seems that I was really wrong. How long has it been since the calamity? I think it's only been a few hundred years. He can't help but start stirring up trouble again. Other than Elder Qin and the others, no one else is qualified to say the word gratitude, because they are the ones who are truly selflessly contributing to great Qin. And you so-called marquises and ministers are a bunch of vermin of my great Qin. With you here, Great Qin will fall sooner or later. Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. The civil and military officials trembled in fear. What was His Highness planning to do? Qin Feiyang looked around at everyone and said, "Therefore, I declare that from today onwards, all martial marquis positions will be abolished." What? All the martial lords suddenly raised their heads, looking at Qin Feiyang. The emperor, old Qin, Qin Feiyang, and Lu Xiaofei and his sister all looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Depose Wu Hou. This was something that had never happened in the history of the great Qin dynasty. This was because the titles of the marquises were personally conferred by the previous emperor and were passed down from generation to generation. Dethroning a marquis was tantamount to going against the previous emperor's imperial edict. I know, you must want to use your ancestors to pressure me. But I'm sorry, my ancestors are still alive, and this time when I return, I will report this matter to my ancestors. Qin Feiyang said lightly. What? The previous emperor is still alive. Everyone was shocked. Feiyang, is this true? The emperor, old Qin, and Qin Feiyang immediately asked. Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. Still alive. The emperor and the others couldn't calm down for a long time. Your Majesty. Don't believe it. After all, this is only His Highness's side of the story. Let's talk about it later. The great Qin Empire was built together with the ancestors of the various martial marquises and the previous emperor. It is also because of this that the previous emperor personally conferred the title of Marquis, in order to take care of us, the descendants of meritorious officials. Your Majesty, we are all descendants of meritorious officials. We can't let people be disappointed. All the marquises looked at the emperor and cried out. The emperor frowned, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, this is indeed a lack of consideration. Father, if you don't make a decision, you will suffer. Do you want the next Zhuge family to appear? Qin Feiyang said. As soon as he heard the Zhuge family, a trace of killing intent flashed in the emperor's eyes. Qin Feiyang looked at the marquises and said, If you can play your part and live like a prince, why would I treat you like this? But unfortunately, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. The ancestors did indeed give you the title of Marquis to take care of you, the descendants of meritorious officials. But what about you? All these years, what have you done? Relying on the death exemption token given to you by the ancestors, you took bribes, perverted the law, and connived with your descendants to bully men and women. What qualifications do you have to continue to be the marquises of the great Qin dynasty? As for what can't let people be disappointed, that's ridiculous. The great Qin dynasty has protected you for more than 10,000 years. No matter how big the favor is, no matter how big the contribution, it should be paid off. Don't tell me we have to protect you for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. I believe that even your ancestors will agree with my decision when they see what you are doing now. Dethroning the marquis position is not negotiable. Chief, draft the decree immediately. Qin Feiyang shouted. The chief eunuch, looked at the emperor. The emperor took a deep breath, returned to the dragon throne, and said indifferently, Do it! Yes. The chief eunuch respectfully replied, Your Majesty, you can't. The marquises were burning with anxiety. If they were really dethroned from their marquis position, then what difference would there be between them and the ordinary people below? Then all the glory, all the power, they would no longer exist. We have said that we will listen to Qin Feiyang. What he said is the imperial edict. The emperor said expressionlessly, Your Highness, we won't dare to do it again. In the future, we will be down to earth and dutiful. Please give us another chance. The marquises looked at Qin Feiyang again, begging with snot and tears. To tell you the truth, back then, I had the idea of dethroning the marquis position. It was because your ancestors were all heroes of the founding of the country that I let you go. But I didn't expect that you still don't repent. What? You all want to control the government. Then, do you want me to give the great Qin to you? Qin Feiyang said. We don't dare, we don't dare. Your Highness, this is the last time I beg you. We promise that in the future we will know our place and not participate in any prince's disputes. The group of people cried out in despair. Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear, turned to the chief eunuch and said, Is it done? Yes, yes, yes. The chief eunuch nodded his head repeatedly, holding the golden imperial edict. He walked in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang glanced at it and said, Read it to them. Yes, the chief eunuch respectfully replied, lowering his head to look at the imperial edict. By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that today all the marquises will be dethroned from their positions and reduced to commoners. If there are any rebels, those who disobey will be exterminated. The moment the imperial edict came out, all the marquises collapsed to the ground. Gone. Everything was gone. Qin Feiyang swept his gaze across the group of people and said indifferently, Of course, my great Qin is not someone who does not care about old friendships. Although you are no longer Marquis, you can stay in the imperial capital, but at this point, Qin Feiyang changed the topic with a monstrous killing intent. He said, If because of resentment you secretly cause trouble and destroy my great Qin, then don't blame me, Qin Feiyang, for being merciless. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a wave of divine power appeared, pouncing towards Marquis Yang. Ah, with a mournful scream, Marquis Yang died without a corpse. Seeing this scene, everyone was scared out of their wits, especially Qin Li, who knelt on the ground, trembling. Was this Qin Feiyang's method? As soon as he came back, he dethroned all the Marquis, and even killed Marquis Yang in front of everyone? Li Jian. Qin Feiyang looked around and shouted again, Your subordinate is here. Li Jian walked in front of Qin Feiyang and bowed. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a golden sword appeared and said, This is a legendary level artifact. I will now officially bestow upon it the name of the dragon slaying sword. Legendary level artifact? Li Jian, Old Man Qin, and the others were startled. What level of artifact was this? Was it very strong? Now, I will give you the dragon-slaying sword. Remember, the dragon-slaying sword represents me, beheading the incapable ruler, beheading the rebellious minister. Qin Feiyang said. Subordinate accepts the order. Li Jian took the dragon-slaying sword. As my friend, as the guardian of my great Qin, you must help me protect the great Qin's mountains and rivers. If you discover that a minister has the intention to rebel in the future, or if you discover that some princes are secretly colluding with the various marquis, kill them all without mercy. Qin Feiyang glanced at Qin Li and said, Yes. Li Jian also looked at Qin Li and nodded heavily, his entire body emitting a sharp aura. Good method. The white-eyed wolf whispered. This guy really had a trick up his sleeve. With a loyal subordinate like Li Jian and this dragon-slaying sword that could kill everything, he could completely crush the ambitions of the various princes and marquis. As long as these people did not stir up trouble, the great Qin would be able to maintain eternal peace. As expected, looking at Li Jian and the dragon-slaying sword, the group of ministers immediately became as obedient as lambs. Qin Li was also in extreme despair. Among these marquis, there were many people who supported him. Now that the various marquis had been dethroned, it was equivalent to turning everything he had painstakingly built up over the years into bubbles. There's one more thing. Qin Feiyang let out a long breath and said to Li Jian, Find Qin Haoyan for me. If he doesn't come, cripple his cultivation. Yes, Li Jian did not ask anything and left with the dragon-slaying sword. Feiyang, why are you looking for Haoyan? The emperor looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. Feiyang, isn't crippling his cultivation too serious? Haoyan has been quite obedient these years and has not made any mistakes. Moreover, he is very respectful to your mother. Old Qin and the others thought that Qin Feiyang was going to make a move on Qin Haoyan, so they pleaded for Qin Haoyan. "Don't worry, I won't hurt him." Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Hearing this, old Qin and the others breathed a sigh of relief. But thinking about it, it made sense. When Qin Haoyan was still a child, Qin Feiyang did not hurt him, let alone now. After all, the current Qin Feiyang was so powerful that even they could only look up to him. How could a mere Qin Haoyan be a threat to him? Chapter 27:65. Uncle Jian, let go of me. I can walk by myself. Soon, a helpless voice sounded from outside. Then, Li Jian took Qin Haoyan into the throne room. As soon as Qin Haoyan entered the throne room, he found that the atmosphere was not right and immediately looked at the civil and military officials around him. "What's going on?" "Greetings, father." Then, Qin Haoyan looked at the emperor above. But when he saw Qin Feiyang next to the emperor, Qin Haoyan's eyes suddenly trembled. Qin Feiyang was also looking at Qin Haoyan. Sure enough, he had grown up. He was 8 meters tall, his eyes were like stars, his figure was tall and straight, and he was wearing a white robe. His thick black hair fluttered in the wind. His whole person exuded a mature and steady aura. If it wasn't for Li Jian, Qin Feiyang wouldn't have recognized this face. After all, when he left before, this Qin Haoyan was just a kid. "Long time no see." Qin Feiyang smiled. "It's you. Bastard, give me your life." Qin Haoyan suddenly rushed toward Qin Feiyang. "I know you hate me, but you don't have to pounce on me as soon as we meet." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. A wisp of divine power emerged and turned into a light curtain, blocking in front of him. Qin Haoyan could no longer take half a step closer. "I want to fight with you." Qin Haoyan punched at the light, but there was no reaction at all. He then roared, "You were not qualified when you were young, and now you are even less qualified." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "I don't accept it." Qin Haoyan roared. "What can you do if you don't accept it?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Humph, I will surpass you sooner or later. Because I have also reached ancestral awakening." Qin Haoyan snorted and had to give up helplessly. He couldn't even use a wisp of divine power. How could he fight Qin Feiyang? "Okay, I'm looking forward to it." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Humph." Qin Haoyan turned around and left. "Wait," Qin Feiyang said. "What?" Qin Haoyan stopped and asked without turning his head. "Of course not. I don't think you're that weak." Qin Feiyang said lightly. "It's good that you know. I'm stronger than you think." Qin Haoyan said. Qin Feiyang said, "If that's the case, then accept the decree." "Receive the edict?" Qin Haoyan was stunned. He turned around and looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, "From now on, you are the crown prince of the great Qin, the future emperor." "What?" Qin Haoyan's expression froze. The gaze of Qin Li, who was kneeling at the side, also slightly trembled. The emperor, Qin Feiyang, Elder Qin, and Qin Sheng, as well as those ministers, all looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. Crown Prince was conferred just like that, and it was the White Sky Prince who was conferred the title. Who didn't know that the White Sky Prince had a grudge against Qin Feiyang? This Qin Feiyang was too generous. He actually gave the throne to the White Sky Prince just like that. Qin Haoyan looked at the emperor and asked suspiciously, "Father, is this your idea?" The emperor came back to his senses and transmitted his voice. "Feiyang, you know your father's thoughts. In your father's heart, you are the most suitable successor to the throne. It is also because of this that I have not conferred Haoyan as the crown prince. But father, you also know what I think. My ambition lies elsewhere." Qin Feiyang secretly said. "Sigh." The emperor sighed secretly and said helplessly, "Then do as you wish." Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haoyan and said, "Why aren't you accepting the order?" Do I have to accept the order just because you want me to? Give you so much face. Besides, I'm not interested. Find someone else. Doesn't Qin Li want it very much? Just give it to him. Qin Haotian said, Give it to me. Qin Li, who was kneeling on the ground, was stunned. Then he raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Qin Li and said to Qin Haotian, He's not suitable. How am I not suitable? Qin Li said angrily. Qin Feiyang said, If I say you're not suitable, then you're not suitable. Aren't you looking down on me? You're my big brother. We're brothers. As for Qin Haotian, he's just... Qin Li said angrily. Shut up. Without waiting for Qin Li to finish, Qin Feiyang shouted coldly. At the same time, Qin Haotian also looked at Qin Li, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Qin Feiyang said, Are you trying to say that Qin Haotian is not born from the same mother as us? That's how it is. Qin Li snorted coldly. The emperor was also furious when he heard this and shouted, You still dare to say it! Qin Li lowered his head, feeling wronged. It was the truth. Why couldn't he say it? Haotian, don't think too much. Whether it's Feiyang or you, you're all my children. The emperor looked at Qin Haotian and smiled. It doesn't matter. Qin Haotian shrugged and said indifferently, If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Since you've received the decree, then take your leave. Qin Feiyang said. Qin Haotian said angrily, I said I'm not interested. Don't you understand? Qin Feiyang said, Then I'm not interested either. What should I do? How would I know? If it really doesn't work, just go to the street and pull someone over. I believe they'll be happy to inherit the throne. Qin Haotian said angrily, You're getting more and more outrageous, aren't you? The emperor's face darkened. Go to the street and pull someone over? Is this what a prince should say? His heart was also full of helplessness. Qin Feiyang, whom he admired the most, had no interest in the throne at all. Fine then. He'll pass the throne to Haotian. After all, Qin Haotian's bloodline power had also returned to its ancestral state, and his temperament was not bad. In the end, even Qin Haotian was not interested. What was going on? Why was the throne, which was supreme in the eyes of others, so worthless in the eyes of these two children? No, that was simply disdain. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Haotian and said, So, you're just determined not to take the throne? Yes. Qin Haotian nodded. Come with me. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and landed at the entrance of the throne room. He spoke without turning his head and walked towards a corner at the side. Qin Haotian looked at Qin Feiyang's back and hesitated for a while, but in the end he still followed. Do you know why I made you the crown prince of Great Qin now? Qin Feiyang turned to look at Qin Haotian and said, No matter why, I'm not interested. Qin Haotian shook his head. What about father? Aren't you just concerned about him? Qin Feiyang asked. What do you mean by that? Me becoming the crown prince doesn't seem to have a direct relationship with my concern for father, right? Jiang Haotian frowned. Wrong. Don't you see the current situation clearly? Take Qin Li, for example. He's eyeing the throne covetously. If we continue to destroy his thoughts, who knows what crazy things he'll do. Perhaps in the end he'll end up like the first prince, the state teacher, and Zhuge Mingyang. Say, if it really comes to that, who do you think will be the most upset about it? Father, of course. Qin Feiyang sighed. Qin Haotian frowned and said, Aren't you back now? It seems that you're more intimidating than me. Qin Feiyang said, I'm back now, but I'll still leave. Still leave? Qin Haotian was taken aback. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then what are you going to do? Qin Haotian was suspicious. What I'm going to do is more important than protecting Great Qin. And it's hard to predict whether I'll live or die. It's very likely that this will be the last time we meet. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. It's better to die outside. Qin Haoyan snorted coldly. Fine, I'll try to fulfill your wish and try to die outside. Qin Feiyong smiled. Uft. Hearing this, Qin Haoyan couldn't help but laugh. That's right. You should smile more often. Don't keep a straight face all day. Qin Feiyong said. Who's smiling with you? Qin Haoyan snorted coldly. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled, saying, You're the third person to awaken the purple gold dragon blood other than me and my ancestors. I believe you have the ability to protect Great Qin. I'm really not interested. Qin Haoyan's face was full of helplessness. I'm not letting you inherit the throne immediately. I'm just letting you be the crown prince first and cut off the thoughts of others. In the future, if you feel that there's someone more suitable and reliable than you can give it to him. I really don't want Qin Li and the others to continue causing trouble like this. Not only will it destroy the relationship between brothers, but it will also directly affect the foundation and fate of Great Qin. After all, Great Qin is not only the blood and sweat of my ancestors, but also something I want to protect. Qin Feiyong said. Qin Haoyan was silent. Qin Feiyong thought for a while and said, How about this? If you agree to be the crown prince, I'll also agree to one of your requests. Request? Qin Haoyan was stunned. He looked up at Qin Feiyong and asked, Any request? Qin Feiyong nodded. Qin Haoyan said, Aren't you afraid that I'll let you die? Qin Feiyong said, I believe you won't make such a request. I didn't expect that the person who understands me the most would be you, an enemy I haven't seen for hundreds of years. Qin Haoyan coldly snorted. Qin Feiyong said with a faint smile, Whether it's an enemy or a brother, it's all for Great Qin. Fine. If you agree to fight with me, I'll agree to be the crown prince. Qin Haoyan thought for a while and nodded. Fight with me? Qin Feiyong was stunned. This kid must be dreaming. Do you think I'm stupid? Of course, you'll suppress your cultivation and fight with me fairly, Qin Haoyan said. A fair fight, Qin Feiyong murmured. What, you don't dare? Qin Haoyan sneered. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said with a faint smile, Your request made me involuntarily recall the battle with my father back then. I've heard of that battle. In the end, you won, so I'll definitely be able to defeat you now. The new generation excels the old. Qin Haoyan clenched his hands and said firmly, You're so confident. Qin Feiyong was stunned. He looked at Qin Haoyan for a while and nodded. All right, I agree. You can choose the time. Okay, when the time comes, I'll come find you. After Qin Haoyan finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the throne room. After taking a few steps, he turned back to look at Qin Feiyong and said, Remember, I agreed to become crown prince not for you, but for father. As long as you agree, anything is fine. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and also walked toward the throne room. A simple conversation was enough for him to get to know this little brother he hadn't seen for hundreds of years. Apart from his hatred for him, everything else was good. He would definitely be a wise ruler in the future. Chapter 2766. Inside the palace, the emperor sat on the dragon throne with a smile on his face. Regardless of whether Qin Feiyong wanted to leave or not, he was very happy that this child could come back. Li Jian, old Qin, and Qin Sheng were also beaming with joy. For Qin Li, this was a very inconceivable thing, because after being together for so long, this was the first time he saw them laughing so happily. But Qin Li, the ministers below, and the dethroned marquises didn't look so good, especially Qin Li and the marquises. For those ministers, at most, they were afraid of Qin Feiyong. But Qin Li was different from the marquises. The marquises were dethroned, and their status and power were no longer there, and they were reduced to ordinary people. For them, this was undoubtedly a disaster, and Qin Li had ambition in his stomach. If Qin Haoyan really agreed to be the crown prince of Great Qin, It would be tantamount to completely destroying all his hopes, because Qin Haotian himself was very outstanding and was the most capable and the strongest among all the current princes. Of course, this didn't include Qin Feiyang. After all, Qin Feiyang wasn't in the imperial capital before. And most importantly, Qin Haotian's bloodline was atavistic, and he had the rare purple-gold dragon blood in the world. No matter how one looked at it, Qin Li didn't have the qualifications to compete with Qin Haotian. In the past, it was also because he knew that Qin Haotian had no interest in the throne, so Qin Li painstakingly planned. But if the ancestor, Qin Haotian, changed his mind, then he really couldn't do anything. Especially behind Qin Haotian, there was Qin Feiyang, this terrifying existence. Although they were blood brothers, Qin Feiyang's power in the palace left an indelible shadow in Qin Li's heart, dethroning a marquis, killing Marquis Yang in public, and bestowing Li Jian the dragon-slaying sword, beheading incapable rulers and rebellious ministers. These things, in Qin Feiyang's eyes, were just small things, but in Qin Li's eyes, each of them was an earth-shattering event. Ta-da! Accompanied by a series of footsteps, Qin Haotian and Qin Feiyang returned to the Golden Luan Palace, one after another. Whoosh! Immediately, everyone looked at the two of them. Qin Feiyang walked to the emperor's side and glanced at the officials below. He looked at Qin Haotian and said with a smile, "Receive the decree." Who? Qin Haotian took a deep breath and knelt in the center of the hall. He looked at the emperor and said, "This son accepts the decree." The emperor was stunned. Agreed? It's over. It's completely over. Qin Li, who was kneeling on the ground, immediately collapsed when he heard Qin Haotian's words. His last hope was dashed. The emperor sent his voice. "Fei Yang, what did you say to him?" "It's nothing much. I'm just trying to persuade them with reason and move them with emotion." Qin Feiyang snickered. "All right. Although it wasn't you in the end, I've finally fulfilled one of my worries." The emperor nodded and looked at Qin Haotian. "Get up." "Thank you, father." Qin Haotian got up. The emperor turned to look at the chief eunuch and ordered, "Write a decree immediately and announce it to the world." Yes. The chief eunuch nodded respectfully. The emperor then looked at the various martial marquises and said, "You have 3 days to move out of the inner city." Your Majesty, the group of martial marquises still didn't give up. They looked at the emperor pitifully, hoping that the emperor could give them a way out. The emperor does not joke. Since the decree has been issued, there is no possibility of taking it back. However, I am also a person who cares about old friendships. I am in the first city district. I will grant each of you a mansion for you to enjoy the rest of your life. After the emperor finished speaking, he looked at the chief eunuch and said, "You take care of this matter." "As you wish." The chief eunuch nodded. Then the emperor looked around and waved his hand. "Court is dismissed." "Court is dismissed," the chief eunuch exclaimed. "This humble subject will take his leave." The officials bowed and quickly left. It was as if they were afraid that Qin Feiyang would kill them. The various martial marquises also left with ashen faces. What should they do if they don't leave? If they continued to pester them, they would only anger Qin Feiyang. If Qin Feiyang was angry, he would massacre everyone. This kind of price was not something they could bear. "Qin Li, you also get up." The emperor looked at Qin Li again. "Thank you, father." Qin Li said gratefully and was about to get up. "Wait." Qin Feiyang said. Qin Li's body stiffened. The emperor's expression was also slightly stunned. He said in a low voice, "Feiyang, he is your younger brother after all." "I know. If he wasn't my younger brother, I would have killed him last night." Qin Feiyang said. When Qin Li heard this, he couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Li and said indifferently, "Do you still remember what you said last night? In any case, It's not something you lowly people can compare to. In your eyes, are the people of Great Qin all lowly people? Aye, Qin Li hurriedly said. Qin Feiyong said, Don't tell me it was just a slip of the tongue. It was a slip of the tongue, Qin Li hurriedly said. There's a saying that has been passed down since ancient times. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it. If Great Qin is compared to a boat, then the millions of people are the water. And it's a torrent. They can make Great Qin float on the water, but they can also make Great Qin sink to the bottom. The people are the foundation of a country. As a prince of Great Qin, don't you know such a simple principle? Qin Feiyong said angrily. I'm sorry. Qin Li knelt there, trembling. If sorry is useful, then what's the use of national laws and family rules? From now on, you will experience the life of a lowly person for me. Li Jian, Qin Feiyong said. This subordinate is here. Li Jian stepped forward. Send him to the 9 great provinces. He is not allowed to return to the imperial capital for 5 years. No one is allowed to help him in secret, and he is not allowed to take anything from the imperial palace. Qin Feiyong shouted. What? Qin Li's body and mind trembled. Yes. Li Jian nodded and walked in front of Qin Li, saying, Let's go. Uncle Jian, don't. Qin Li shook his head. Li Jian did not waste words. He picked up Qin Li and turned into a stream of light, flying out of the throne room and disappearing. The emperor retracted his gaze and looked at Qin Feiyong, saying, Feiyong, you, father! I'm doing it for his own good. With his personality, if he doesn't suffer, something big will happen sooner or later. To be honest, if it wasn't for the fact that blood is thicker than water, I wouldn't even bother with him. Qin Feiyong said. Sigh. The emperor sighed deeply and blamed himself. It's my fault. I didn't discipline him well. It wasn't easy for you to come back, but I made you worry. So many brothers and sisters. You can't take care of them all. But then again, father, you're really old but vigorous. You gave birth to so many in just a few hundred years. Qin Feiyong chuckled. Elder Qin and the others next to him couldn't help but laugh. The emperor's face twitched. He stared at Qin Feiyong and said angrily, Are you asking for a beating? How dare you laugh at your father? No. Qin Feiyong hurriedly waved his hand. The emperor rolled his eyes at him and looked at the white-eyed wolf and Lu Xiaofei, asking suspiciously, They are. Grandpa, it's us. Lu Xiaojia giggled and took a facial restoration pill. Xiaofei? Xiaojia. The emperor was stunned and laughed heartily. So it's you. It was obvious that he loved the siblings very much. What about him? Qin Sheng and the others looked at the white-eyed wolf. You can't even recognize me. It seems that you people are terminally ill and incurable. The white-eyed wolf shook his head and changed. It's you. Looking at the white-eyed wolf's real body, the emperor and the others were stunned. The white-eyed wolf said proudly, Who else can be so powerful except for me? They smiled bitterly. His shameless character hadn't changed at all. The emperor turned to Qin Feiyong and asked suspiciously, Why are Xiaofei and Xiaojia with you? Qin Feiyong smiled and said, I came back the day before yesterday and stayed at the Lu family for a day. I see. The emperor nodded and then said with a smile, Then let's go. Your mother will be shocked when she sees you. Your Majesty, Your Highness, we won't disturb your family reunion. Elder Qin smiled. Qin Feiyong was speechless and said, What do you mean by disturb? You are also our family. Elder Qin and the others were stunned and couldn't help but laugh, their faces full of relief. Although this child's strength was so strong that they could only look up to him, his character didn't change at all. How about this? Let's go and see your mother first. I'll set up a banquet tonight and invite Elder Qin and the others to come and welcome you. The emperor looked at Qin Feiyong and smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then let's go. The emperor said, Come tonight, let's have a few drinks. Qin Feiyang looked at Elder Qin and the others and said with a smile, "Sure, sure." The four nodded. In the depths of the imperial palace, there was a building that stood out from the rest. From top to bottom, the imperial palace was practically filled with glorious and imposing palaces. But this was a courtyard. The courtyard was not big, 2 stories high, and had an antique atmosphere. It was surrounded by a garden, where hundreds of flowers were blooming and the fragrance was overwhelming. A secluded path, winding and roundabout, ran through the entire garden. On both sides of the path, there were many green, small beasts swaying in the wind, exuding endless vitality. And everywhere in the imperial palace, there was basically a guard every 3 steps and a sentinel every 7 steps. But there was not a single guard here. At this moment, there was a pleasant zither sound in the garden. The zither sound came from a pavilion in the garden. A woman in white was sitting in the pavilion, playing the zither with both hands. Behind the woman stood 2 maidservants who were in their late 20s. Their eyes were blurred, as if they were intoxicated by the beautiful zither sound. A moment later, the song ended. "Your Highness, I'll never get tired of listening to your zither sound. It's comparable to the sound of nature." "Yes, but there's a trace of longing in this zither sound. Are you thinking of His Highness again?" The 2 maidservants went forward and poured tea while asking with a smile, "That's right. This woman in white was Qin Feiyang's mother, Lu Qiyu." Sigh. Lu Qiyu sighed and said worriedly, "It's been hundreds of years. I wonder how Feiyang is now." "Heaven helps the worthy. Although we haven't seen His Highness with our own eyes, His Highness has done so much for the great Qin. He will definitely be rewarded." The 2 maidservants comforted her. Chapter 2767. "I hope so." Lu Qiyu smiled and said, "By the way, Li Er was in the 1st district last night. Did something happen?" "I really can't hide anything from you, Empress. Something big did happen in the 1st district last night. We were just about to report it to you." The 2 maids said. "Say it," Lu Qiyu said. One of the maids said, 16th Prince seems to have been." Halfway through her words, the other maid suddenly seemed to have discovered something. She pointed to the entrance of the garden and exclaimed, "Empress, look!" Lu Qiyu and the maid were stunned and looked up. At that moment, Lu Qiyu stood up and stared at the entrance, her face full of disbelief. At the entrance, there were 4 people and a wolf. It was Qin Feiyang, the emperor, the white-eyed wolf, and Lu Xiaofei. Why is Feiyang here? Could it be that I miss him too much and have an illusion? Lu Qiyu muttered. At the same time, Qin Feiyang looked at the garden curiously and said, "Mother lives here now?" "Yes. Ever since that incident, your mother has been tired of everything. So father personally built this courtyard for your mother in the depths of the imperial palace. This place is also named after your mother. Autumn Rain Pavilion." The emperor smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "Autumn Rain Pavilion is quite good. What about you, father?" "Nonsense. Your mother and I are husband and wife. We definitely live together." The emperor rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang asked, "What about the other concubines?" "What's wrong with you, child? Making fun of your father?" The emperor said angrily, "This is the truth. Who doesn't know that the emperor has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and has many wives and concubines?" Qin Feiyang said, "The more you talk, the more excited you get?" The emperor frowned. Okay. I won't say it." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. The emperor shook his head and smiled. "It's true that I have many wives and concubines, but I only love your mother." "Haha, you should say this in front of mother. It will be more effective." Qin Feiyang teased. "Bastard." The emperor rolled his eyes and glanced at the garden. "Your mother is there, looking at you." Qin Feiyang looked over, and when he saw Lu Qiyu standing in the pavilion, His eyes trembled slightly. Mother! His greatest wish, after returning from the divine sight, was to take a good look at his mother. Now that he was finally able to see her, he was unable to control his emotions. Tap, tap! He quickly walked to the front of the pavilion and knelt on the ground. Your child pays his respects to mother. Feiyang, Lu Qiyu seemed to have lost her soul. She slowly walked to Qin Feiyang and sized up Qin Feiyang's face. She said, Feiyang, is that you? Mother, are you not dreaming? Mother, it's me. I'm back. Qin Feiyang raised his head to look at that familiar and affectionate face and nodded. Qiyu, you're not dreaming. Our child is really back. The emperor walked to the side and smiled. Really? Lu Qiyu looked at the emperor. Yes. The emperor nodded. Lu Zhenyang looked at Qin Feiyang again, and his eyes were filled with tears. He's His Highness. He's exactly the same as the statue we saw. The two maids were also sizing up Qin Feiyang in amazement. Child, Lu Qiyu could no longer control her emotions. She squatted on the ground and hugged Qin Feiyang, crying, Mother! Drops of tears fell on his head. Qin Feiyang could not help but blame himself for making his mother cry again. Tears welled up in the emperor's eyes as he watched the scene unfold. Lu Qiyu was his wife. Of course, he knew what Lu Qiyu missed the most. That was Qin Feiyang. There were countless nights when she called Qin Feiyang's name even in her dreams. Now that the child was back, she could not control it. After a long time, Lu Qiyu pulled Qin Feiyang up and said, Let mother take a good look at you. Qin Feiyang stood there obediently. Lu Qiyu said, You've lost weight. You must have suffered a lot outside. Have I lost weight? I don't think so, the emperor muttered. He was as strong as an ox, but he did not dare to expose her. Lu Qiyu turned to look at the two maids and said, Go and take out all the pastries. Okay. The two of them nodded and quickly ran to the attic next to them. After serving the empress for so long, this was the first time they saw the empress so excited. She was a little out of control. Feiyang, come. Sit. Lu Qiyu pulled Qin Feiyang into the pavilion. As for the emperor, White-Eyed Wolf, and Lu Xiaofei, they were completely ignored. They only had Qin Feiyang in their eyes. This made them very helpless. They could only enter the pavilion without being invited. Empress, the pastries are here. The two maids carried a total of 4 plates of pastries back to the pavilion and placed them on the table. Feiyang, these were all made by mother herself. Eat. Lu Qiyu grabbed a piece of pastry and personally delivered it to Qin Feiyang's mouth. Mother, I'm not a child anymore. Qin Feiyang glanced at White-Eyed Wolf, the emperor, and the others and said with a red face, What are you talking about? In mother's eyes, you will always be a child. Lu Qiyu said. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and took a bite. That's right. This was made by mother herself. He would never forget this taste. Qiyu, we have lived together for so many years, but we have never enjoyed this kind of treatment. The emperor said sourly. What are you talking about? Lu Qiyu glared at the emperor. Lu Xiaofei laughed and said, Grandma, we have never enjoyed this kind of treatment either. Xiaofei. Lu Qiyu was stunned. She looked at Lu Xiaofei and said, You are here too? Lu Xiaofei was stunned. Did they really treat them as air? Lu Xiaojia ran up and hugged Lu Qiyu's arm. She said unhappily, Grandma, we have been standing here for a long time. You only noticed us now. This, Lu Qiyu smiled awkwardly and said, Little girl, I'm sorry. It's okay, because we have long expected this to happen. Lu Xiaojia giggled. Lu Qiyu rubbed Lu Xiaojia's head and looked at White-Eyed Wolf. White-Eyed Wolf rubbed his nose and said, I don't mind. Do whatever you want. Lu Qiyu suddenly laughed and handed the pastry in her hand to White-Eyed Wolf's mouth. She said with a smile, You should try it too. Ahem. I don't mind if you ignore me, but I mind this pastry very much. Look, little Chinzi took a bite. There are still teeth marks on it. White-eyed Wolf said with a look of disdain. Ah, only then did everyone realize that this was the pastry that Qin Feiyang had taken a bite of before. Lu Qiyu became more and more embarrassed. She had really lost her composure. Eat it or leave it. Qin Feiyang glared at White-eyed Wolf, snatched the pastry from Lu Qiyu's hand, and stuffed it into his mouth. He said, "Mother, don't worry about it. It has claws. If it wants to eat, it can take it by itself." What attitude? Think about it. Who has been by your side all these years? It's me. Do you understand? White-eyed Wolf said angrily. Then he sat down at the table, grabbed a piece of pastry, and stuffed it into his mouth. Looking at White-eyed Wolf's funny look, the two maids couldn't help but snicker at the side. Lu Qiyu looked at Qin Feiyang and then at White-eyed Wolf, and a smile appeared on her face. Although so many years had passed, the relationship between a man and a wolf had not changed at all. "Feiyang, when did you come back?" Lu Qiyu sat opposite Qin Feiyang. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, took a piece of pastry and handed it to Qin Feiyang and asked. Obviously, after being disturbed by everyone, his mood had calmed down. "I came back the day before yesterday. I stayed with Grandpa for a day." Qin Feiyang said. "I see." Lu Qiyu nodded and asked, "Then only you came back?" Qin Feiyang and White-eyed Wolf looked at each other and nodded. "Yes, you're being outrageous. No matter what, you have to bring my daughter-in-law back." Lu Zhengyan looked at Qin Feiyang unhappily. "Daughter-in-law?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "What's with your expression?" Lu Qiyu looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and suddenly said, "You and Xiaoyu? No, we are very good." Qin Feiyang quickly waved his hand. "That's good. Xiaoyu is a good woman. You must not bully her." Lu Qiyu said. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded, making him look like a heartless man. Wait. Suddenly, Lu Qiyu's expression froze. She looked at Qin Feiyang and White-eyed Wolf and said, "Only you came back. Then do you have to leave?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Why? Is it not good at home?" Lu Qiyu said anxiously. "The children have grown up and have their own things to do. They can't be tied to us for the rest of their lives." The emperor smiled. "Shut up." Lu Qiyu glared at him. The emperor smiled bitterly and sat aside obediently. The two maids were used to the scene, but if it was seen by outsiders, it would be incredible to the extreme. The emperor of Great Qin was actually so afraid of a woman. Of course, this was not fear but love. "Mother, I don't want to leave you, but there are some things that I have to do. I promise that when everything is done, I will come back immediately and stay by your side." Qin Feiyang said. Lu Qiyu frowned and said, "What do you have to do? Can't others do it?" "Others really can't, because they are not as capable as your son." Qin Feiyang laughed. It was rare for him to be narcissistic. Shameless. White-eyed Wolf pursed his lips. "Can't you shut up when there is food?" Qin Feiyang glared at him. "Is it a crime to tell the truth?" "I don't think so." White-eyed Wolf said. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly. He looked at Lu Qiyu again and said, "Mother, I know what you are worried about. Don't worry, I will be fine. Sai, as your father said, you have grown up and can't be kept." "All right." Lu Qiyu sighed and said with a smile, "As long as you can live well and don't forget us." "How can that be? No matter who I forget, I can't forget you all." Qin Feiyang smiled. Chapter 2768. The emperor smiled and said, "At least you still have some conscience." Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. "Go and tell the imperial kitchen to prepare. I want to hold a family banquet in the Autumn Rain restaurant tonight. It must be completed before dark. Also, inform the princes and princesses The emperor looked at the two maids and ordered. Yes, the two maids responded respectfully. Then they turned around and left quickly. Father, mother, how many brothers and sisters have you given me? Qin Feiyang looked at the emperor and Lu Chuyu curiously. Hearing this, the couple couldn't help but blush. White-eyed Wolf rolled his eyes and said with a sneaky smile, I have to admit that you're really amazing. You're both grandparents, but you still. The couple was even more embarrassed. Uncle Wolf, we don't agree with you. Can't we have more children after becoming grandparents? We'll talk about it again. Grandpa and Grandma are still so young, Lu Xiaofei said. Lu Chuyu and the emperor were helpless. It was fine when Lu Xiaofei spoke up for them, but it was even more embarrassing when he spoke up for them. Young? In terms of age, they were all old antiques. However, in the path of cultivation, age was not the main point. For example, Qin Feiyang was already an antique in the eyes of others. The most important thing was that he was not married yet, let alone having children. By the time he got married and had children, the children of Lu Xiaofei and his sister would probably be adults. What exactly is there? Qin Feiyang was curious. The emperor said, Didn't Lu Hong and the rest tell you that you're in the Lu family? No, they said that there's a big group. Qin Feiyang said. A big group? The emperor was speechless. This was too exaggerated. He said, You'll know when you see them tonight. Then I'm really looking forward to it. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Next, it was inevitable that they would ask about his well-being. However, Qin Feiyang didn't mention a word about the situation in the ancient world, because he didn't want his family to worry about him. Noon. Lu Chuyu personally cooked a table full of delicious dishes for Qin Feiyang. It felt good to be at home, especially when she ate her mother's cooking. She felt an unprecedented sense of happiness and satisfaction. Afternoon. Lu Xiaofei and his sister stayed in the Autumn Rain Inn. Qin Feiyang and the White-Eyed Wolf entered the mountain behind the palace. Hundreds of years had passed in the back of the mountain. Other than the flowers and trees, there was not much change. The Kirin army was guarding the entrance. When they saw Qin Feiyang, they were also shocked and doubtful. They even suspected that they were dreaming. In the deepest part of the back mountain, this was a place full of life. The vegetation was lush and the wildflowers were in full bloom. Clear rivers flowed from east to west, north to south like giant dragons. Furthermore, there were a lot of ferocious beasts here. Almost every ferocious beast had the cultivation of a battle emperor. However, they were very well-behaved and quietly cultivated, making this place seem especially peaceful. Qin Feiyang and the White-Eyed Wolf passed through the forest and soon heard the sound of a waterfall. After walking for a while, a giant mountain that was more than 10,000 feet high came into sight. Around the giant mountain, white mist lingered and auspicious beasts flew. A magnificent waterfall poured down from the top of the mountain and gathered at the foot of the mountain to form a lake that was about 1,000 feet long, connecting the surrounding rivers. On the surface of the lake, ripples were rippling and lotus leaves were standing. Beside the lake, there was an inconspicuous, small courtyard. The courtyard was rather old. It was surrounded by a wooden fence that was more than a meter high. In the courtyard, other than a 2-story building, there was also a flower garden, a vegetable garden, a pavilion, a stream. This place was filled with simplicity and a sense of tranquility. Moreover, in the middle of the lake, there was a stone platform. On the stone platform, there were 5 statues. Each statue was more than 3 meters tall and looked very lifelike. Among them, the statue in the center was the founding emperor of the great Qin dynasty, Qin Batian. Behind them were Emperor Hong, Emperor Chun, and the current emperor. The last statue was Qin Feiyang. These 5 statues were personally created by Qin Feiyang, and this was also the place of inheritance that he created. Back then, the inheritances he left here were the eclipse of the sun and moon, the Guiyuan sword technique, the ruins of the end, the divine dragon technique, and the most powerful divine art he had at that time, the divine dragon technique. As for the 3,000 incarnations, he hadn't completely controlled them at that time, so he couldn't leave them behind. Slave seal, puppet technique. Considering various factors, he didn't leave them behind. As for the 6-word divine art, at that time he had this thought, but perhaps because he hadn't fully comprehended the 6-word divine art, he didn't leave behind the inheritance. But even so, with the divine dragon technique, it was enough to benefit the future generations of the great Qin dynasty. At this moment, by the lake, 2 old men sat opposite each other. The 2 of them were drinking tea and playing chess. Their expressions were extremely leisurely and comfortable. The old man in black took a chess piece and placed it on the chessboard. He smiled and said, "Father, you can really hold it in." "Otherwise what? Could it be that I'm like those young people scrambling to find Feiyong? At least I'm old. I can't afford to lose this person." The old man in white sitting opposite him shook his head and laughed. "That's right." These 2 old men were Qin Feiyong's great-grandfather and grandfather, Emperor Qin. The 2 of them had already heard from old Qin and the other 3 that Qin Feiyong had returned. However, they were very calm and didn't take the initiative to look for Qin Feiyong. Firstly, it was a matter of face. Secondly, they knew that Qin Feiyong would come to see them. "Grandfather, great-grandfather, your comfortable days are really enviable." Suddenly, a laugh came. "Look, isn't he here?" Hearing this voice, a smile suddenly appeared on Emperor Chen's face. He looked at Emperor Chen sitting opposite him and laughed. Emperor Chen also smiled slightly. Then, the 2 old men got up and looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a man and a wolf slowly walking towards them on a small path not far away. "This stinking brat is even calmer than us." Emperor Chen laughed and scolded. "This is in line with his character." Emperor Hong shook his head and smiled. After a short while, Qin Feiyong and the white-eyed wolf walked in front of the 2. Qin Feiyong looked at the 2 old men for a while, smiled slightly and bowed. "Grandson pays respects to grandfather, great-grandfather." "2 old men, how are you?" The white-eyed wolf also waved his paw and greeted. "Old but strong, very good." Emperor Hong patted his chest hard, then pointed to the stone bench next to him and said with a smile, "Sit down." "Okay." Qin Feiyong sat on the side, looked at the chess game on the table, and then looked up at the stone platform in the middle of the lake. The white-eyed wolf kept looking at the chess game. What the hell was this? He couldn't understand it at all. "You stinking brat, can't you be a little excited when you see grandfather and great-grandfather?" Emperor Chen looked at Qin Feiyong speechlessly. "Didn't I learn this from you? The mentality is the most important." Qin Feiyong smiled. Emperor Chen rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyong and said with a smile, "Why do you want to come back?" Qin Feiyong was a little surprised, looked at Emperor Chen, and asked curiously, "Grandfather, you seem to have known that I will leave." "Isn't it simple? If you plan to stay at home, you will definitely bring our granddaughter-in-law to see us. But not now. What does this mean?" "It means that you just came back to see us temporarily." Emperor Qin smiled. Qin Feiyong nodded in realization and said with a smile, "Grandfather's eyes are really sharp." "Don't flatter me. Tell me, how long will you stay this time?" Emperor Qin said, "I don't know yet." Qin Feiyong shook his head. "It's okay. Grandfather and great-grandfather are at home. You don't have to worry at all." Emperor Qin smiled. "Okay." Qin Feiyong nodded, thought for a while, looked at the 2, and said, "I have found my ancestor." As soon as Emperor Qin and Emperor Hong heard this, their calm expressions immediately changed. Qin Batian was Emperor Hong's biological father, which meant he was Emperor Chen's grandfather. The 2 naturally cared about Qin Baishan's safety. Emperor Hong took a deep breath and asked, "How is father now?" "Very good." Qin Feiyong nodded. That's good. I thought I would never see him again in my life, but now it seems there is still hope. Emperor Hong smiled. Yes, next time I will come back with my ancestor. Qin Feiyong said. Okay. Emperor Hong nodded and said with a smile, It's good to come back. You can meet your brothers and sisters. Qin Feiyong said, I heard from grandfather that this is the idea of you too, or else, counting on you and Haojian. Look at the two of you. None of you are married and have children. You don't have to say, after all, you are wandering outside, it's understandable. But Haojian is also one-track-minded. Every time I chat with him, he says that he is not interested in the throne and marriage. What can we do? We can't let our Qin clan's bloodline die in the hands of the two of you. Since we can't count on the two of you, we can only let your parents continue to work hard. So, you can't blame us, you can only blame yourselves. Emperor Hong smiled. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly. In the end, it was his and Qin Haoyan's fault. Okay, you don't need to tell us about the situation of the ancient world. After all, even if we know, we can't help much. Just tell us, how have you been these years? Emperor Hong asked. Qin Feiyong thought for a while and said with a smile, Although there were many disasters, I survived. Good. You didn't let us down. The two nodded. When Qin Feiyong left, they had already thought that the problems that Qin Feiyong would face in the future would be more difficult than when he was in Great Qin. In their hearts, they were still worried. And now, seeing that Qin Feiyong came back alive, they were completely relieved. Qin Feiyong looked at the statue in the center of the lake again and asked curiously, Grandfather, great-grandfather, how many people have obtained the inheritance here in these years? Not many, and only one person has obtained the complete inheritance. Emperor Hong said. Qin Haojian? Qin Feiyong asked. Emperor Hong nodded and asked, I heard from old Qin that you have already met him in the throne room. Yes, Qin Feiyong replied. How do you feel? Emperor Hong asked with a smile. Very good. It's much better than I expected. Qin Feiyong smiled. Haojian is indeed very good in all aspects. If there is a chance in the future, teach him more. Emperor Hong said. I will. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then play 2 games with us? Emperor Hong pointed at the chessboard. This. I haven't played for a long time. I'm afraid of being laughed at by you. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. As the Prince of Great Qin, he naturally knew how to play chess, but since he was expelled from the imperial capital, he rarely touched it again. It's not a big deal. Why would we laugh at you? Come on. Emperor Hong shook his head speechlessly. All right, I'll play a few games with you 2 elders. Qin Feiyong smiled. Next, in this quiet place, there was endless laughter, and it seemed incomparably harmonious. Chapter 2769. What did you say? Father is holding a banquet at the Autumn Rain Inn tonight to welcome Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong. Isn't he my elder brother? In a magnificent palace, a young girl around the age of 13 or 14 looked at a maid beside her. That's right. His Highness is your elder brother. The maid said. When did he come back? The young girl was suspicious. Don't you know? His Highness came back yesterday. And this morning, he killed Marquis Yang in the throne room and deposed the other Marquis. I also heard that because Prince Li made a mistake, he was expelled from the imperial capital by His Highness and can't return for 5 years. The maid said softly, He's that powerful. The young girl was surprised. Princess, your elder brother is extraordinarily powerful. When you go to the Autumn Rain Inn tonight, you must not be naughty. The maid said worriedly. I won't. The young girl giggled, but her eyes were rolling around. Welcome him at night? We've never enjoyed such treatment, let alone in the Autumn Rain Inn. That's Mother's residence. It's hard for ordinary people to enter. in another palace, an imposing young man shook his head and said, "After all, he's Qin Feiyang. Your Highness, this old servant has something to say to appease your anger. Although His Majesty and Her Majesty have many children, the person they dote on the most is actually still Qin Feiyang." A eunuch standing by the side said, "Why should I be angry? This is the truth. After all, my elder brother is the guardian of the great Qin. No matter what, he's better than us. It's normal that father and mother dote on him." The young man said, "Elder brother?" The eunuch was stunned. "He's the eldest son of our bloodline. It's understandable that we call him elder brother." The young man smiled. "That's true." The eunuch nodded. "He deposed a marquis and even expelled Qin Li from the imperial capital. My elder brother's methods are a little scary. Seems like I have to behave myself tonight." The young man muttered, "Definitely. Furthermore, this old servant has a premonition that if your Highness performs well, you might be able to obtain a great opportunity." The eunuch said with a smile. "Opportunity," the young man murmured. When the princes and princesses received the news that they were going to attend the banquet at the Autumn Rain Inn, they couldn't help but feel nervous, not to mention other things. Just the various rumors about Qin Feiyang alone made them feel awe. Time flew by. Night fell. Pavilion of Autumn Rain. In the main hall of the attic, there were 2 mahogany dining tables and 20 mahogany chairs in the hall. Maids were walking in and out of the room, carrying dishes that smelled good and tasted good. Outside, there were lanterns hanging on both sides of the path and around the pavilions, illuminating the garden. The Emperor Lu Qiyu and Lu Xiaofei were all sitting in the pavilion, drinking tea and chatting. Laughter could be heard everywhere. Princess Yun has arrived. Accompanied by a cry, a woman in her 20s slowly walked into the garden. The maids that came with her stayed outside the garden. Princess Yun glanced in front of her. When she saw Lu Qiyu and the others in the pavilion, she quickly walked over and bowed. "Greetings to father and mother." "You're here." Lu Qiyu smiled. Princess Yun nodded and entered the pavilion. When she saw Lu Xiaofei and his sister, she smiled. "You're here too. Auntie, you're getting more and more beautiful." Lu Xiaojia ran up and hugged Princess Yun's arm, looking very intimate. "You have the sweetest mouth." Princess Yun pinched Lu Xiaojia's nose and looked around. "Father, mother, where's big brother?" "He went to the back of the mountain to visit your grandfather and great-grandfather. He should be back soon." Lu Qiyu smiled. "Prince Xian has arrived." Another cry was heard. A young man in his 20s strode into the garden. "Mother, father." The young man greeted Lu Qiyu and the emperor from afar. "Xian, come here." Lu Qiyu was also full of smiles. Qin Xian ran to the pavilion and looked at Princess Yun. He grinned. "Sister, you came earlier than me. Why are you in such a hurry to see Big Brother? Aren't you in a hurry too?" Princess Yun laughed. "Of course. After all, we all grew up hearing about Big Brother." Qin Xian chuckled. "Princess Wan, Prince Ji has arrived." Along with a shout, a man and a woman entered the garden. The man was about 1.8 meters tall, and the woman was about 1.7 meters tall. They wore luxurious clothes and a long skirt and had an extraordinary aura. "Father, mother." The 2 entered the pavilion and bowed to Lu Qiyu and the emperor. The couple nodded. "Sister Yin, brother Xian, Xiaofei, Xiaojia." Princess Wan smiled and walked towards Princess Yin and the others. As for Prince Xi, he stood behind Lu Qiyu with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. He didn't seem to care about anything around him. His face didn't seem to be smiling. Prince E has arrived." Soon, 2 more people ran into the garden. Both of them were very young, about 13 or 14 years old. They looked quite cute as they walked. Mother, father, the two little ones ran over. One sat on Lu Chuyu's lap, and the other sat in the emperor's arms. Xiaoyi, you are already so old. Why are you still sitting on father and mother's laps? What are you doing? Qin Xian walked forward and pinched their cheeks. Princess, he giggled. What does it matter? There are no outsiders. As she said that, Princess he looked at Lu Xiaofei and his sister and said, Why aren't you coming over to greet your aunt? In your dreams. Lu Xiaofei pursed his lips. She was obviously younger than him, but she still acted like an old man. Prince he jumped down from the emperor's lap and ran in front of Lu Xiaofei. Brother Fei, women have long hair and short knowledge. Don't bother with her. Long hair, short knowledge? Princess Lu Yin, Princess Wan, and Lu Xiaojia all looked at Prince Yi unkindly. Lu Chuyu also shook her head and laughed. Princess Yi also widened her eyes and looked at Prince Yi. Impudent! How dare you speak to your sister like that? Prince Yi said, Bullshit, you are clearly my sister. It's sister. Princess Yi said angrily. It's sister. Prince Yi picked his ear and said lightly. You? Princess Yi glared at Prince Yi and then looked at Lu Qiu. Mother, tell me who was born first. Whether it's sister or sister, we are all family. What's there to fight about? Lu Qiu was helpless. Family. Shouldn't there be a first come, first served rule? He was born later than me. Why should he call me sister? Princess Yi said aggrievedly. Well, you were born first. Lu Qiu smiled bitterly. Prince Yi looked at Lu Qiu with dissatisfaction and said, Mother, you didn't say that before. I was born first. Okay, aren't you guys annoying? Every time you meet, you fight about this. Qin Xian glared at the two little ones. If you are annoying, plug your ears. Princess Yi snorted coldly. That's right, I didn't ask you to listen. Prince Yi also glared at Qin Xian. Qin Xian was slightly stunned and immediately raised his arm and said, You two little ones, do you believe that I will beat you? Come on. If you dare to beat us, we will let mother and father beat you. The two of them were not afraid at all. They ran into the arms of the emperor and Lu Qiu and looked at Qin Xian provocatively. Qin Xian's face darkened. Haha, what a pair of clever little brats. Following a burst of laughter, Li Jian, Old Qin, and Qin Sheng slowly walked toward them. Seeing the 5 people coming, Qin Xian, Princess Yin, Princess Wan, Prince Xi, and the two little ones immediately stepped forward and bowed. Elder Qin nodded, rubbed the two little ones' heads, and said with a smile, Do you think your brother Qin Xian really doesn't dare to beat you? He is letting you know. I'm not afraid. Prince Yi shook his head. Elder Qin shook his head and laughed. He looked up at the emperor and Lu Qiu and said, Where is Fei Yang? In the back mountain. The emperor said. Elder Qin nodded, looked at Qin Xian and the others, and said with a smile, Let me see if you have made any progress in your cultivation. Needless to say, my progress is definitely the greatest. Prince Yi said proudly. So confident. Come on, I will practice a few moves with you and see how much progress you have made. Qin Xian shook his arm. Aren't you bullying the weak? Prince Yi stared at Qin Xian with dissatisfaction. If you don't dare, just say it. Don't make excuses. Qin Xian pursed his lips. Wait for me. When I am as big as you, I will fight with you again. See how I will beat you then. Prince Yi said with a snort. Sister will help you then. Princess Yi patted Prince Yi on the shoulder and said with a smile, How many times do I have to say, You are my sister? Prince Yi said angrily, I am your sister. Princess Yi said, Sister. The two little ones glared at each other, neither of them willing to back down. Seeing this scene, the emperor and others couldn't help but want to laugh. Prince Haoqian has arrived." Suddenly, another shout rang out. They saw Qin Haoyan striding over. Although he was still very young, he already had the aura of an emperor that couldn't be ignored. "Brother Haoqian," Princess Yi's eyes lit up. She hurriedly ran over and jumped into Qin Haoyan's arms. "Little girl, you are so old, yet you are still so naughty?" Qin Haoqian rubbed Princess Yi's head, his eyes full of love. Princess Yi giggled and said, "Brother Haoqian, you say something fair. Am I the elder sister or the younger sister?" "Brother Haoqian, you have to be honest. Don't talk nonsense." Prince Yi also ran over. Qin Haoqian looked at the two of them, his face full of helplessness, and said, "You two might as well fight. Whoever wins will have the final say." The two little ones looked at each other, as if they were thinking about something. "Don't dare to fight? Then be honest and don't chatter." Qin Haoyan walked into the pavilion with one in each hand and bowed. "Father, mother." The two nodded and smiled. What everyone didn't know was that Qin Feiyang had actually returned a long time ago and was standing in the void above at this moment. Chapter 2770. White-Eyed Wolf, Emperor Hong, and Emperor Chen were also there. However, Qin Feiyang had activated the concealment art, so no one noticed. Why did he activate the concealment art and hide above? He just wanted to observe these little brothers and sisters first, what kind of personality they had. Emperor Hong laughed. "Feiyang, did you hear how Qin Haoqian addressed your mother?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Emperor Hong secretly said, "He called Qiuyu Mother Empress, which means that he has long regarded Qiuyu as his own mother." Emperor Chen, who was beside him, laughed. "To be honest, the more I look at this kid, the more I like him. After all, he is someone I have my eyes on. His character is definitely not bad." Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. Shameless. Emperor Chen rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang and asked, "How is the observation?" "It's about time. Qin Xian's personality is a bit frivolous and sloppy, but his nature is kind. Qin Yin, Qin Wan, knowledgeable and well-mannered. Qin Ji, silent and a bit cold. As for Qin Yi, these two little ones, speaking of which." Qin Feiyang couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. These were the two clever kids. They are twins, so when they were named, one was called Yi and the other was called Yi. They have been fighting over who is the older brother and who is the older sister? Emperor Hong shook his head and smiled. "Twins." Qin Feiyang was startled, looked at the two little ones and said, "Even if they are twins, there should be an order." Qin Yi was born first. Qin Yi was born later. Although they are always arguing, Qin Yi still loves his sister dearly. Emperor Hong transmitted. "In other words, Qin Yi is the youngest?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Yes. Other than you and Haoyan, Qin Li is the oldest, followed by Qin Yin, Qin Xian, Qin Wan, Qin Ji, Qin Yi, Qin He," Emperor Hong said. "Listening to your words, all the brothers and sisters have arrived?" Qin Feiyang said. "Otherwise." Emperor Hong looked at him suspiciously. "Didn't Grandpa and the others say that there will be a large group of them? Counting them, including Qin Li, there are only 7. Qin Feiyang was stunned. 7 isn't a lot. Emperor Hong looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. No. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. A hint of craftiness flashed across Emperor Hong's eyes as he said, "If you also feel that it's not much, then this old man will have your parents continue to work hard." Hearing this, Qin Feiyang could not help but smile bitterly. She had already given birth to 7 children. More? Looking at his great-grandfather's attitude, he couldn't wait for his father and mother to give birth to dozens of great-grandchildren for him. Not to mention his father and mother. Even he would not agree to such a thing. After all, his mother's life had been hard enough. She should have been enjoying life, but now she had to take care of a bunch of children. They're probably getting impatient. Let's go down quickly. Emperor Qin said with a smile. Qin Feiyong and Emperor Hong nodded. Qin Feiyong's mind moved, and the concealment art disappeared. Then the 3 people and 1 wolf landed outside the pavilion. Feiyong. Lu Chuyu was the first to notice Qin Feiyong and quickly got up. Hearing Lu Chuyu's voice, everyone also looked at Qin Feiyong. Even the 2 little ones quieted down. They opened their eyes wide and looked at Qin Feiyong curiously. Qin Ji, who had his eyes closed, also opened his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong. Father, grandfather! The emperor stepped forward and bowed to Emperor Qin and Emperor Hong. The 2 nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at the group of younger brothers and sisters, smiled slightly and said, Do you need me to introduce myself? Qin Xian and the others were silent, as if they were a little reserved. All right, let me introduce myself. I'm Qin Feiyong, and I'm also your big brother. Qin Feiyong smiled. When Lu Qiu heard this, she said snappily, What do you mean, Count? You are their big brother. Ha ha! Qin Feiyong smiled, looked at the group of people and said, Just as Mother said, I am your big brother, not a man-eating demon. Let go. They looked at each other. They also wanted to let go, but the tension in their hearts could not be dispelled. Even the 2 little ones were the same. Who? After a while, Qin Ji took a deep breath and took the lead to walk in front of Qin Feiyong. He bowed and said, Little brother Qin Ji greets big brother. Qin Feiyong was a little surprised. He never thought that Qin Ji would be the first person to talk to him. Qin Feiyong looked at Qin Ji and nodded. The cultivation of the war saint is not bad. Thank you for your praise, big brother. This is all thanks to big brother's protection. If it weren't for the inheritance and pills left behind by big brother, I wouldn't have been able to step into the 1-star war saint so quickly. Qin Ji lowered his head and said, What kind of inheritance did you get? Qin Feiyong asked with a smile. Ascending dragon art. Qin Ji said, Sure, when you have time in the future, come and find me. I will teach you some profound meanings of the ascending dragon art. Because my current ascending dragon art can raise my cultivation by 2 realms. Qin Feiyong smiled. 2 realms. Qin Ji's gaze trembled. This was a problem that he had never thought about before. That's right. Whether it is a battle art or a divine art, as long as you carefully comprehend it, there will be room for improvement. In short, you can't stay the same. You have to learn to create your own. Qin Feiyong said. Create your own, Qin Ji muttered, as if he understood and bowed. Thank you for your teachings, big brother. Qin Feiyong smiled. Work hard. The future of Great Qin is your world. Qin Ji nodded and didn't say anything more. He silently retreated to the side and lowered his head to ponder over Qin Feiyong's words. What are you guys standing there for? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If there is anything you don't understand, quickly ask. Old man Qin smiled. Qin Xian hesitated for a moment. Finally, he mustered up his courage and ran to Qin Feiyong, smiling. Big brother, I also have a question. Is there room for improvement in the concealment art? You got the concealment art? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Qin Xian nodded and disappeared in front of everyone. Very soon, Qin Xian appeared again. It is indeed the concealment art. There is indeed room for improvement in the concealment art. For example, the concealment art that I have now can be activated twice a day for 2 hours each time. Qin Feiyong said, Twice? That means there are 2 chances to save my life. Qin Xian was surprised. Yes. Qin Feiyong smiled. Qin Xian smiled and said, Big brother, when will you teach me? Okay. Qin Feiyong nodded. Thank you, big brother. You are much better than I thought. Qin Xian said. Qin Feiyong was stunned and asked curiously, Then what kind of person am I in your imagination? Strict, cold, old-fashioned, serious in speech and manner. Qin Xian said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. It turned out that in the hearts of these brothers and sisters, he was such a person. No wonder they were so reserved. Will you be angry if I say so? Qin Xian looked at Qin Feiyang carefully. Why should I be angry? Qin Feiyang shook his head, looked at everyone, and said with a smile, This is the first time we meet. As your big brother, I will give each of you a gift. Gift? They looked at each other. What gift? Qin Xian asked curiously. After getting along with each other, he had completely let go. Uncle's greeting gift is incredible. You have to be mentally prepared, Lu Xiaofei said. Qin Xian looked at Lu Xiaofei and asked, From your tone, you have already received a gift. Of course. Lu Xiaofei smiled proudly. Qin Xian said, What treasure? Let me take a look. No. Lu Xiaofei shook his head. Stingy. Qin Xian pouted. Qin Feiyang smiled. With a wave of his hand, 6 divine weapons and 6 jade slips appeared. You can choose yourselves. Qin Feiyang looked at them and said with a faint smile. Qin Xian immediately climbed up, looked left and right, and finally grabbed one of the jade slips and a long spear. Thank you, big brother. After thanking him, Qin Xian ran to the side and carefully looked at them. Qin Ji. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Ji. Qin Ji hesitated for a moment, but in the end he couldn't help but go forward and grab a jade slip and a broadsword. Lu Qiyu smiled. Qin Yun, Qin Wan, why aren't you going? Qin Yun and Qin Wan looked at Lu Qiyu. Under Lu Qiyu's encouraging eyes, they finally stepped forward and walked towards Qin Feiyang. Big brother. When they arrived in front of Qin Feiyang, the two of them bowed. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, Slowly you'll find that I am actually quite easy to get along with. The two looked at each other, and a smile appeared on their faces. They took a jade slip and a divine weapon one after another. Brother, do we have one too? The two little ones looked at Qin Feiyang. Of course. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, But you are still young. Let mother keep it for you first. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the remaining 2 divine weapons and 2 jade slips floated in front of Lu Qiyu. Brother, you are so nice. The 2 little ones came in front of Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Ha ha. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh out loud. He dotingly rubbed their little heads. The emperor smiled and said, Let's go, the banquet is ready. The group immediately walked towards the pavilion. Looking at Qin Feiyang's back, Qin Haoyan's eyes seemed to have a trace of disappointment. Everyone had a gift, but he didn't? Sure enough, he was just an outsider after all. And Qin Haoyan's abnormality was discovered by Lu Qiyu and said with a smile, Haoyan, don't think too much. Feiyang will not forget you. Qin Haoyan was slightly stunned and hurriedly said, Mother, what are you talking about? I'm not thinking of anything. I watched you grow up. Can you hide your thoughts from me? Let's go. Lu Qiyu smiled kindly, pulled Qin Haoyan's hand, and walked towards the pavilion. Looking at Lu Qiyu and feeling the strong motherly love, Qin Haoyan smiled slightly. In fact, it was already enough, because he had a mother who always loved him. At the banquet, everyone was laughing and talking. Moreover, Qin Feiyang asked Hua-yi for more than 12 jars of immortal wine. This immortal wine was a top-grade divine wine that couldn't be bought with money. Even the emperor couldn't help but be greedy and drink 1 cup after another. Emperor Hong, Emperor Chen, Elder Qin, Li Jian, and Qin Sheng were also full of praise. After 3 rounds of wine, looking at the approachable Qin Feiyang without any airs, Qin Yun and Qin Wan also gradually let go. This big brother was indeed different from what they imagined. Chapter 2771. The banquet didn't end until late at night. Li Jian, Old Man Qin, and Qin Sheng left drunk. For their cultivation, drinking wouldn't make them drunk. But they were happy today, so they didn't use divine power to dissolve it. But Emperor Hong, Emperor Chen, and Qin Yun didn't leave. It seemed that they wanted to talk to Qin Feiyang all night. Big brother, where have you been all these years when you left? Qin Yun and Qin Wan looked at Qin Feiyang curiously. They also drank a lot, and their cheeks were slightly red. Ancient world. Qin Feiyang smiled. Ancient world. Qin Yun and Qin Wan were stunned and asked, "What kind of place is the ancient world?" Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and said with a faint smile, "The ancient world is a place full of opportunities and also full of danger." Are the people in the ancient world strong? Also, is the ancient world big? Not only Qin Yun and Qin Wan, but Qin Haotian, Qin Xian, Qin Ji, and the two little ones were also curious. Of course, there are war gods everywhere in the ancient world. It's also very big. Even a corner of the ancient world is several times, dozens of times better than the Great Qin. Qin Feiyang said, "So big? There are so many war gods. Then aren't you in great danger in the ancient world?" Qin Wan exclaimed, "Yes, it's a narrow escape." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, "But fortunately I came here safely." Then, big brother, with your current strength, what level are you in the ancient world? Qin Xian asked. How should I put it? In terms of means and strength, I should be considered one of the best. But in terms of cultivation, I can only be considered above average. Qin Feiyang said, "With your cultivation, you can only be considered above average?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Lu Chuyu, Emperor Hong, and Emperor Chen were also shocked, and even their drunkenness was gone. "Yes, I'm now at the 9th heaven realm. But in the ancient world, especially the divine land, there are a lot of 9th heaven realm and great perfection 9th heaven realm. And above the 9th heaven realm is the undead realm. The undead realm is the real peak expert in the ancient world." Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, "Then, aren't you about to break through to the undead realm?" Qin Ji, "It's not that easy." Qin Feiyang shook his head. There were as many 9th heaven's realm cultivators as there were dogs in the ancient world, but there were only a few in the imperishable realm. I really didn't expect there to be such a wonderful, great world outside. Qin Haotian muttered, his face full of yearning. Qin Feiyang glanced at him, then looked at Qin Xian and the others and said, "It's already so late. You guys should go back and rest first." Qin Xian was a little reluctant. "Gather here tomorrow morning. I'll take you to a place." Qin Feiyang said, "What place?" Everyone was curious. Qin Feiyang said, "A place you're afraid of." "A place we're afraid of?" Everyone was stunned. "You'll find out tomorrow." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Okay. Your big brother just came back 2 days ago. He needs to have a good rest. Listen to me. Go back." Lu Qi got up and said with a smile, "Okay then." Everyone nodded. "Remember, no one is allowed to be absent tomorrow. If anyone doesn't come, I'll ask the white-eyed wolf to invite him. The white-eyed wolf is not as easy to talk to as me." Qin Feiyang looked at them and said, "Ahem." The white-eyed wolf coughed and pretended to be fierce. "I'm not easy to talk to. Be careful." Everyone smiled disapprovingly and turned around to leave. Di asked suspiciously, "Feiyang, where are you going to take them tomorrow?" Jade can't be uncut. The descendants of the Qin clan were born with a heavy burden, so they must bear the pain that others can't bear. Qin Feiyang said, "Pain, Lu Chuyu." Didi and Di-Chin looked at each other. Why didn't it sound like something bad? "Little Qin Zi, I know what you're going to do." Qin Xian, Qin Ji, Qin Yin, and Qin Wan are okay. After all, they're already so old. But Qin Yi and Qin Yi are still so young. Are they suitable? The white-eyed wolf frowned. They're already 13 or 14 years old. Are they still young? Qin Feiyang said, looking at Lu Chuyu and Didi. I think you've spoiled them too much. Even now, they're still acting like a spoiled child in your arms. The couple smiled awkwardly. You can't blame them. The pain you suffered in the spiritual state has always been a knot in their hearts. So they feel sorry for Qin Xian and this group of children. Didi sighed. I can understand. If they were born in an ordinary family, naturally no one would care. But unfortunately they're not. As the descendants of the Qin clan, whether it's a younger brother or a younger sister, they have to bear the responsibility. Qin Feiyang said, Well, it's up to you. Anyway, we know that no matter what you do, it's for their own good. But you asked Li Jian to send him to the 9 states. Although we all know that you want him to go there to gain experience, he may not think so. I'm afraid that in the end, it will be counterproductive. DDD was a little worried. Then it depends on his awareness. If he can wake up, it proves that he's not hopeless. But if he continues to be stubborn, then When Qin Feiyang said this, he did not continue. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Lu Chuyu and the others felt the coldness in Qin Feiyang's words, and their hearts trembled. Okay, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and looked at Qin Haotian. You didn't say much the whole night. Is it because I didn't give you the divine weapon and divine art that made you uncomfortable? No. Qin Haotian shook his head to hide it. Qin Feiyang smiled. What kind of person haven't I seen? Do you think you can hide your little thoughts from me? I don't need your charity. Qin Haotian snorted and got up to leave. You have to come tomorrow. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at Qin Haotian's back. Why? Qin Haotian raised his eyebrows. Don't you want to defeat me? This is an opportunity. You're now a 3-star combat emperor, and I can help you break through to the war god realm in a few days. Qin Feiyang said. What? Qin Haotian looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Qin Feiyang said, Maybe it won't take a few days. 1 day will be enough. 1 day, Qin Haotian's face was filled with disbelief. Not to mention Qin Haotian. Even the emperor and the others didn't dare to believe it. I think you don't want to miss this opportunity. Qin Feiyang smiled. Okay, I'll come on time tomorrow morning. Qin Haotian took a deep breath and nodded at Qin Feiyang, then turned around and left. His heart couldn't calm down for a long time. 1 day, he could break through to the war god realm in just 1 day. If it was true, then it was too unbelievable. Feiyang, you're not joking, right? Lu Chuyu watched Qin Haotian leave, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Mother, why would I joke about this kind of thing? Qin Haotian is different from the other siblings. His temperament no longer needs to be tempered. As long as he follows me to the Black Tortoise realm tomorrow to cultivate in seclusion, as long as he can successfully comprehend the profound mysteries of becoming a god, I guarantee that he will definitely be able to step into the war god realm in less than a day. Qin Feiyang said, One had to know, in the current Black Tortoise realm, that was 1,000 years in a day. Moreover, with the growth of the spirit vein and crystal vein, the energy of the Black Tortoise realm had also reached a rare level. Even if one didn't refine the soul stone, their cultivation would still advance by leaps and bounds. Not to mention, a war king like Qin Haotian, entering the Black Tortoise realm was equivalent to entering a cultivator's paradise. When Emperor Hong and the others heard this, although they felt that it was a bit like a fantasy, they still believed it. Father, where do Li Jian and Old Man Qin usually stay? Qin Feiyang suddenly looked at the emperor and asked. Almost all of them are in the back mountain. The emperor said. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, Ant Emperor, Spider Emperor, Golden Wolf King, Silver Wolf King, and Pangolin, and the others. The Nether Demon Spider and the others had all chosen to stay in the Great Chin. Them, I don't know either. Sometimes they come back once every few years, sometimes once every few decades. I don't know where they are playing. The Emperor laughed. These guys, Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. It seemed that all of them were living quite carefree lives. Qin Feiyang stood up and walked outside. At the same time, he sent a sound transmission. Fire Lotus, prepare 11 8th Step God level Spirit Vein and Crystal Vein for me. I already knew you would need it, so I've already prepared it. Fire Lotus's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. You already knew? Qin Feiyang was slightly startled and secretly laughed. As expected, you understand me. Feiyang, where are you going? Seeing this, the Emperor and the others also stood up and chased after Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously, looked at the white-eyed wolf, and said, Same old rules. Understood. The white-eyed wolf grinned, and with a swoosh it soared into the air, followed by the rolling divine power, and disappeared into the ground. Rise! At that moment, the ground began to tremble violently, and the entire garden, including the attic, rose from the ground. Lu Qiyu and the others were puzzled. I understand. Uncle wants to bury the Spirit Vein and Crystal Vein here. Seeing this, Lu Xiaofei said, Spirit Vein? Crystal Vein? What is that? Lu Qiyu and the others were stunned. These are all supreme treasures. The day before yesterday in our village, Uncle also buried 10 spirit veins and crystal veins. On the same day, almost everyone in our village broke through their cultivation. Lu Xiaofei said excitedly. So powerful? The few of them were shocked. Very powerful. Lu Xiaojia also nodded, her big black eyes looking at Qin Feiyang, full of admiration. Not long after, the garden rose into the air. Qin Feiyang raised his arm and waved gently. A crystal vein and a spirit vein immediately appeared, and then fell into the pit below. Why is there only one spirit vein and one crystal vein? Lu Xiaofei and his sister were suspicious. The Lu family had 10. Logically speaking, there should be more here. After all, this was Uncle's home. Why was there less than the Lu family? Chapter 2772. Soon, the spirit vein and crystal vein were placed, and everything was restored to its original state. This energy, Emperor Hong and Emperor Qin looked at each other in disbelief. This is the crystal vein and the spirit vein. Qin Feiyang briefly explained the use of the crystal vein and the spirit vein. So that's how it is. Everyone suddenly understood. Uncle, why did you only place one crystal vein and one spirit vein here? Lu Xiaofei could no longer hold back the doubts in his heart and asked. Qin Feiyang said, Because this is specially for your grandmother. So it's like that. Lu Xiaofei suddenly understood. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Qiyu and said, Mother, set up a barrier around it in the future to prevent the energy from leaking out. Okay. Lu Qiyu nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at Emperor Hong and Emperor Qin and said with a smile, Grandpa, let's go to the back mountain. Emperor Qin hurriedly said, Feiyang, this thing is so precious. Keep it for yourself. Don't worry about us. Obviously, Qin Feiyang was also going to place the crystal vein and the spirit vein in the back mountain. It's okay. I still have a lot. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. A lot? Emperor Chen was stunned. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. How many? Lu Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang curiously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, So many that you can't count them. Lu Xiaofei was stunned and asked, Is it that exaggerated? Otherwise, Qin Feiyang laughed out loud. This kid was quite amusing. Back mountain. Hundreds of breaths passed. a huge amount of energy emerged. Li Jian, Elder Qin, and Qin Sheng were alarmed at the first moment. This energy, what's going on? They were still a little drunk, but when they sensed this energy, the drunkenness suddenly disappeared. Then, the 5 of them rushed into the sky and looked around. Soon, they found a group of people standing in the sky, not far away. "Young master, your highness." The 5 of them flew over. Li Jian looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously and asked, "Young master, what's going on?" Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "To create a good cultivation environment for you." A good cultivation environment? The 5 of them became even more suspicious. Qin Feiyong looked at Li Jian and asked with a smile, "I believe you are familiar with soul stones, right?" "Soul stone?" Li Jian was slightly startled. He said, "Yes, you broke through from the false god realm to the divine battle realm because you refined a soul stone. Soul stones are produced from a type of soul vein, and now I've buried 10 soul veins here. Furthermore, these 10 soul lines are rank 8 god level soul lines. Even in the ancient world, a rank 8 divine soul line is rare. With these spirit veins and crystal veins, your cultivation will progress by leaps and bounds." Qin Feiyong smiled faintly. "I see." Li Jian nodded in realization, his face full of excitement. Old Qin asked, "What are crystal veins?" The divine crystals produced by crystal veins have the effect of replenishing divine power, and it is also very helpful for cultivation. Qin Feiyong said with a smile, "Thank you, young master. Thank you, your highness." The few of them were very excited. They knew that Qin Feiyong did this not only for Emperor Hong and Emperor Qin, but also for them. "You helped me protect Great Qin. Of course, I won't forget you. In the future, this place must be isolated with a barrier to prevent the energy of the spirit veins and crystal veins from leaking out. And you can also treat this back mountain as Great Qin's holy land. For example, some talented young people with good character can be brought to the back mountain to cultivate." Qin Feiyong said. "Okay." The 5 of them nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at Emperor Hong and Emperor Qin and said, "In a few days I will give you some more pill recipes." "What pill recipes?" Emperor Hong asked. "Pill recipes that can make Great Qin rise quickly." Qin Feiyong smiled slightly. "Haha, in this life, what I am most proud of is having you as my grandson." Emperor Chen laughed. "In this life, what this old man is most proud of is having you as my great-grandson." Emperor Hong also looked at Qin Feiyong with gratification. Lu Qiyu and Emperor Qin were also full of smiles. Qin Feiyong was their son, and being praised by the 2 old men, they were naturally happy. After bidding farewell to Emperor Hong, Emperor Qin, and Li Jian, Qin Feiyong, White-Eyed Wolf, Lu Xiaofei and his sister, followed Emperor Qin and Lu Qiyu back to the Autumn Rain Pavilion. In the main hall, the candlelight flickered. Qin Feiyong accompanied his parents for a long talk through the night. Being able to sit and drink tea with his parents was the happiest thing in his life. He cherished every minute and second of this moment. Unknowingly, the sky began to brighten, and the sun rose slowly. After washing up, Emperor Qin looked at the mother and son and said with a smile, "You 2 talk. I will go to the morning assembly." "Okay." Lu Qiyu nodded. Qin Feiyong said, "Father," as the emperor of a generation, "you can't be too sentimental." Emperor Qin was slightly taken aback and scolded with a smile, "Brat, do you still need to teach me?" After saying that, he turned and left. Lu Xiaojia suspiciously looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "Uncle, what do you mean by that?" "Sister, you still don't understand? Yesterday, Uncle dethroned Wu Ho. This storm will definitely not calm down in a short time. He said that to remind grandfather not to give these people any thoughts." Lu Xiaofei said, "So it's like that." Lu Xiaojia nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at the brother and sister and asked, I say, you two didn't sleep all night. Aren't you sleepy? Just kidding. No matter what, I am also a cultivator. Which cultivator do you think would be sleepy? Lu Xiaofei raised his head a little proud. Cultivators are amazing. I'm a little sleepy, Qin Feiyang said. You're sleepy? Lu Xiaofei was startled. He immediately stood up, looked at Qin Feiyang with concern, and asked, Uncle, you can't be sick, right? Sick? Qin Feiyang was startled. If you're not sick, why would you be sleepy? Lu Xiaofei said. You're the one who's sick. Qin Feiyang glared at him snappily and said, Sooner or later, you will understand how blissful and luxurious it is to lie in bed and sleep. Blissful? Extravagant. I really don't understand. Lu Xiaofei shook his head. In his opinion, sleeping was a waste of time. He might as well use this time to cultivate. No rush. Your life has just begun. You will slowly understand in the future. Qin Feiyang laughed. Princess Yin, Princess Wan, Prince Yen, Prince Ji, Princess Yi, Prince Yi has arrived. Suddenly, following a shout, Qin Xian and the other 5 ran into the pavilion and bowed. Mother, big brother. Lu Qiyu nodded and smiled. It's quite early. Qin Feiyang looked at the 6 of them. Qin Xian laughed and said, How dare we neglect big brother's orders? Don't be glib, and from this moment on, I am not your big brother. Qin Feiyang said. What do you mean? The 6 of them looked at each other. Qin Feiyang did not explain and said lightly, Give me all your Qinkuan bags. Qinkuan bags? The 6 of them were suspicious. Hurry up, don't dawdle, White-Eyed Wolf shouted. Okay. The 6 of them took out their Qinkuan bags and handed them to Qin Feiyang. Mother, help them keep these Qinkuan bags first. Qin Feiyang turned around and handed the 6 Qinkuan bags to Lu Qiyu. Okay. Lu Qiyu nodded and took the 6 Qinkuan bags. At this time, Qin Haotian strode into the hall and directly took out his Qinkuan bag without saying anything. You don't need it. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Qin Haotian was slightly stunned and then put away his Qinkuan bag. Qin Xian said unhappily, Big brother, why does a brother Haotian have to hand over his Qinkuan bag? This is unfair. There is no fairness in this world. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he waved his hand and disappeared with Qin Haotian and the others. Black Tortoise World, at the edge of the desert of death. In the sky, a group of people appeared out of thin air. It was Qin Feiyang and the others. Where is this? Qin Xian and the others looked around curiously. In contrast, Qin Haotian and Qin Ji were relatively calm, but there was a trace of doubt in their eyes. Qin Feiyang closed his eyes and extended his perception infinitely. Soon he found the fire lotus somewhere in the netherworld sea. Immediately after, with a thought, the fire lotus appeared in front of him. What a beautiful sister! Big brother, is she your confidant? The few of them looked at the fire lotus in surprise. Qin Yi, that little guy, looked at Qin Feiyang innocently and asked, Confidant? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. This kid was a little precocious. Fire Lotus looked at the few of them, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Are they your younger siblings? Qin Feiyang nodded. Fire Lotus looked at the few of them and smiled. Hello. Hello, sister. Qin Yi ran to Fire Lotus and said, Sister, you're so beautiful. Your little mouth is so sweet. Fire Lotus rubbed Qin Yi's head, looked at Qin Feiyang, and asked, Why did you bring them here? To sharpen their skills, Qin Feiyang said. Sharpen their skills? Fire Lotus was stunned and nodded. Understood. Then I'll leave this matter to you. Right? Qin Feiyang pointed to Qin Haotian and said, He doesn't need to sharpen his skills. Just take him to the devil's land to cultivate in seclusion. All right. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang sent a sound transmission. Unless it's a matter of life and death, don't give them any help. Don't worry. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded and disappeared again. Sister, where is this? What is your relationship with Big Brother? As soon as Qin Feiyang left, the two little guys looked at Fire Lotus and asked. Fire Lotus smiled and looked at Qin Haotian. Come behind me. Qin Haotian nodded and silently walked behind Fire Lotus. Fire Lotus then looked at Qin Xian and the others. Boom! Suddenly, a monstrous divine might emerged. Under this divine might, the six of them suddenly fell into the abyss of death. I won't answer any of your questions. All you need to know is that you will face a situation of 9 deaths and 1 life, and I won't give you any help. Do you see the desert below? This desert is called the Desert of Death, one of the biggest forbidden areas here. The storm here can even kill a false god, and your mission is to cross the Desert of Death. Fire Lotus said coldly. What? The 6 of them suddenly changed their expressions. Go. Whether you can survive or not depends on your luck. Fire Lotus waved her hand, and the 6 of them fell into the desert below uncontrollably. They looked around, their eyes full of fear. Chapter 2773. They're panicking just like that? They're indeed delicate. Fire Lotus shook her head. They grew up under the care of father and mother and have never experienced such a situation. Moreover, it's so sudden, it will definitely be difficult for them to adapt. Qin Haotian said, Then, if one day Great Qin falls into danger again, what will they do? Will they also be in such a panic? If that's the case, then they will only die faster. After Fire Lotus finished speaking, she lowered her head and looked at the mountains and rivers outside the Desert of Death. Seeing this, Qin Haotian suddenly had an uneasy premonition in his heart. All the beasts below the War Emperor, listen up, immediately enter the Desert of Death and chase after them. Fire Lotus shouted, Roar! At that moment, one after another, the loud roars of beasts rang out, and the earth began to tremble as if there was a huge earthquake. What? Qin Xian and the others looked over in shock, only to see a group of beasts rushing towards the Desert of Death like a torrent. Immediately, the 6 of them changed their expressions and raised their heads to look at Fire Lotus and Qin Haotian. You guys are on your own. Fire Lotus said coldly, then turned around and left with Qin Haotian without looking back. I thought there was something fun, but I didn't expect to be chased by beasts. Big Brother is trying to kill us. Qin Xian cried out in sorrow. What are you shouting for? Can't you tell? Big Brother is tempering us. Hurry up and activate the concealment technique. Run. In comparison, Gua Ji was slightly calmer. The flustered Qin Xian immediately activated the concealment technique and escaped with the 5 of them. Devil's Land. Qin Haotian stood above the medicine field and looked down with his mouth agape. There were actually so many medicinal herbs, and they were all above 10,000 years old. Furthermore, he had never seen most of the medicinal herbs before, and the energy here, wasn't this too terrifying? As soon as he arrived here, his cultivation began to loosen, as if he was about to break through. Fire Lotus said, This is our base camp, the Devil's Land. Devil's Land, Qin Haotian muttered. How is this a Devil's Land? It was simply a cultivator's paradise. Boom! As the energy continued to pour into his body, his cultivation could no longer be controlled and directly broke through. He broke through a small realm just like that? Qin Haotian was dumbfounded. First, find a place to cultivate in seclusion. When you break through to the 9-star Battle Emperor level, I will explain to you the profound meaning of becoming a god. Fire Lotus said. Qin Haotian looked at the Fire Lotus and asked, Can I really become a god in a day? Of course not, Fire Lotus said. Qin Haoyan was slightly taken aback and hurriedly asked, Then what did he say? According to the time outside, it is indeed possible within a day, Fire Lotus said. The time outside. Qin Haoyan was taken aback and asked suspiciously, What does this mean? Fire Lotus said, To put it simply, a day outside is 1,000 years here. What? Qin Haoyan's body shook. A day outside was equivalent to 1,000 years here. What kind of joke was this? How could that be possible? There are some things that you can't understand yet. Work hard on your cultivation. You're dreaming if you want to defeat your brother with your current strength. Fire Lotus shook her head and turned to leave. Qin Haoyan hurriedly asked, Then may I ask, what is your cultivation level? Fire Lotus pondered for a moment and said, without turning her head, With my cultivation level, you don't even have the qualifications to look up to me. After saying that, she took a step forward and disappeared from Qin Haoyan's sight. I don't even have the qualifications to look up to you, Qin Haoyan muttered as he raised his head and scanned his surroundings. This was his base camp? Crack! Suddenly, he clenched his fists. His eyes shone with determination. No matter how strong you are, I will catch up to you and defeat you. Autumn Rain Building. Backyard. Lu Qiuyu was making breakfast. Qin Feiyang, Lu Xiaofei, and Lu Xiaojiao were all helping at the side. Lu Xiaofei asked curiously, Uncle, where did you take them? You want to go too? I can fulfill your wish. Qin Feiyang looked at him with ill intentions. Lu Xiaofei felt a little guilty. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like a good thing. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Don't worry. I will bring you and your sister there sooner or later. Before that, you have to be mentally prepared. The siblings looked at each other, swallowed their saliva, and smiled awkwardly. Why don't we forget it? In your dreams. I didn't let you in now because I still need you to lead the way. Qin Feiyang said, That's right. This pair of brother and sister had to be sharpened as well. Lead the way? The siblings were stunned. Yes. Go look for your Uncle Situ and Uncle Ling Yunfei. Qin Feiyang said. The siblings nodded. Lu Qiuyu asked, Feiyang, when are you going to look for them? Let's go after breakfast. Qin Feiyang smiled. All right. After all, we haven't seen each other for so many years. Seeing you return, they must be very happy. Lu Qiuyu nodded. Yes, it's fine if you don't come back. This time I miss them very much. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Lu Qiuyu smiled and said, Then after going to the spiritual state, let's also visit the Mermaid Emperor. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Lu Qiuyu said, and Eldarin, Jiang Jingyi and Nanshan, Fengchan, Black Bear King, and the others are also in the spiritual state. They are also in the spiritual state. Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. I wanted to leave them in the capital, but they said that they are used to life in the spiritual state, so your father and I didn't force them. Lu Qiuyu smiled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. In the past, old Masterin, for example, wanted to stay in the capital. But now, he was still unwilling to stay in the capital? Sure enough, after experiencing some things, one state of mind would slowly change. Qin Feiyang asked, What about Luo Qingzhu, Fengling Air, and Run Wushuang? Why, are you still missing them? Lu Qiuyu smiled. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said with a bitter smile, Mother, what are you thinking about? What am I thinking about? You are friends, so it's normal to miss them. You are thinking too much. Lu Qiuyu looked at Qin Feiyang with a teasing smile. Qin Feiyang was stunned, and the bitter smile on his face deepened. Lu Qiuyu said, They are now in the spiritual state's holy palace. Holy palace? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. Lu Qiuyu nodded. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, What are they doing in the holy palace? managing the holy palace and cultivating talents for great Qin. Lu Qiyu smiled. That's really surprising. Qin Feiyang mumbled. Don't say, they are quite capable. Why don't you just marry them all? Lu Qiyu said. Again, Qin Feiyang was helpless. You child, look at them, they're beautiful and capable. They are the goddesses in many men's hearts. You are the only one who doesn't know how lucky you are. Lu Qiyu rolled her eyes at Qin Feiyang. Don't. I don't want to be like father who has many wives and concubines. It is enough to have one in this life. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Sure enough, it is impossible to expect you to give birth to the Qin clan. Lu Qiyu shook her head. Then I will have to trouble you, mother. Qin Feiyang smirked. Kid, are you asking for a beating? Lu Qiyu's face darkened. Mother, you don't know, but Grandpa and Great-Grandpa want you and Father to have a few more children. Qin Feiyang said. More children? Lu Qiyu's mouth twitched. He really thought of her as that. After having good breakfast, Qin Feiyang stood up, looked at Lu Qiyu and said with a smile, Then I will go to the spirit state first. Lu Qiyu nodded and said, Come back early. I will probably come back at least tomorrow. After all, there are too many old friends to visit. Qin Feiyang said. Then you can have a good gathering with them. Lu Qiyu smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and disappeared with White-Eyed Wolf and Lu Xiaofei. Spirit State. Butterfly Valley. Although the battle back then destroyed everything here, after years of recuperation, it had already recovered. Moreover, just like before, there were all kinds of wild flowers here. Among the flowers, there were medicinal herbs planted, and groups of butterflies were flying among the flowers. It didn't look much different from before. Qin Feiyang suddenly had a trace of surprise on his face. What? White-Eyed Wolf looked at him suspiciously. There are so many familiar auras. Qin Feiyang closed his eyes and carefully sensed for a moment before smiling. Here he sensed old Master Ren's aura and Zhu Yu, who had once protected the Butterfly Valley. There was also Yan Nanshan, Feng Cheng, Jiang Jingyi, Luo Qianxue, Lu Yin, Jishua, Li Ji, Elder Yuan, Black Bear King, and so on. Almost all his acquaintances were here. There are indeed a lot. White-Eyed Wolf sensed and grinned. Everyone here had an inseparable relationship with them. For example, Lu Yin was once an elder of the Sacred Palace and took care of Qin Feiyang. Li Ji was once the steward of the Treasure Pavilion and later managed it. He even helped Qin Feiyang take care of Luo Qianxue. Ji Shui and Elder 10,000 Zhang also extended a helping hand when Qin Feiyang was in trouble. Yan Nanshan, Jiang Jingyi, and Luo Qianxue naturally didn't need to be mentioned. The three of them treated Qin Feiyang well like their own children, especially Luo Qianxue. In Qin Feiyang's eyes, she was like a mother. Feng Cheng was Feng Ling Heir's grandfather. Zhu Yu used to guard the Butterfly Valley and was also the Spirit State Mansion lord before old Master Ren. Back then, every time he entered the Forgotten Continent, he would interact with Zhu Yu. It could be said that these people were a part of his life that no one could erase. Lu Xiaofei pointed below and said, Grandpa Ren and the others all live beside that lake. Qin Feiyang looked over and saw small wooden buildings sitting beside the lake in picturesque disorder. He remembered that there was a lake in the Butterfly Valley in the past, and this lake was still in its original position. Actually, all of this was carefully arranged by Grandpa Ren and the others according to the original Butterfly Valley. Lu Xiaofei sighed. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked suspiciously, Why did you restore the original Butterfly Valley? Because you will come back sooner or later. They don't want you to look at the scene in front of you when you return to the Butterfly Valley and not feel unfamiliar. Lu Xiaofei said, I see. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. To even consider such a detail, He was truly considerate. Chapter 2774. It's indeed hard on them. The white-eyed wolf sighed. Even though it was so heartless, it couldn't help but feel touched. Although it seemed like a small matter, it was more meaningful to Qin Feiyang than anything else. There was a good saying, if you want to know if a person is really good to you, you have to look at the small details. Lu Xiaofei asked curiously, Uncle, will you place the spirit vein and crystal vein in the butterfly valley? What do you think? Qin Feiyang asked back. I'm not you. How would I know? Lu Xiaofei pursed his lips. Then shut up. You talk the most. Qin Feiyang glared at him, landed in the valley, and walked toward the lake step by step. The memories that had been sealed away also surged out of his mind. He had experienced too much in the Butterfly Valley, because in the past, whether it was going to the imperial capital or going to the Forgotten Continent, he had to pass through this place. There were too many memories here. At the same time, by the lake, two people sat by the shore, drinking tea and fishing. They were Old Master Rin and Juyu. I'm wondering, what am I doing today? I'm not comfortable staying in the imperial capital, so I came back to accompany you fishing, and it's still early in the morning. Juyu frowned. Isn't this good? Ordinary life, peaceful days. Old Master Rin chuckled. Juyu rolled her eyes at him, turned to look at the courtyard next to them, and said, Qianxue, is breakfast ready? Soon. Smoke curled up in the courtyard, and a gentle voice came out. The owner of this voice was Luo Qianxue. A year's plan is in the spring, and a day's plan is in the morning. The morning air is so good. Soon, another old man walked out, stretched lazily, and walked to Old Master Rin and Juyu. He poured a cup of tea, took a sip, and said with a smile, Good morning. Good morning. Look at what time it is now. Qianxue has been busy all morning, and you're only up now. You glared at the old man. Qianxue is still young. How can an old man like me compare to her? The old man chuckled as he grabbed a fishing rod and sat on a small stool to fish. Old Feng, Shuang, and the rest won't be coming back today. Old Master Rin turned to look at the old man and said, That was right. This man was Feng Ling Heir's grandfather, Feng Cheng. Although he died in Black Bear City, Qin Feiyang came to the spiritual state to find his corpse after opening the gate of rebirth. Then he was resurrected with the Black Bear King and his son. He won't come? Feng Cheng was slightly taken aback. He turned to look at Old Master Ren and asked doubtfully, Why? It seems that the temple is recruiting disciples, so they are very busy. Old Master Ren said, I see. Feng Cheng nodded and waved his hand. Young people can't be compared to us, old men. It's fine if you're busy. Elder Feng, you're wrong. You are old, but we are still very young. Another burst of laughter sounded. Jiang Jingyi and Yan Nanshan walked out of their respective courtyards with smiles on their faces. You have the nerve to say that. You're so young, yet you don't go out to make contributions. Instead, you spend all your time with us old men. Feng Cheng looked at the two of them in disdain. Yan Nanshan smiled. Aren't we afraid that you will be lonely? That's why we stayed here, to accompany you. Brother Jiang, don't you think so? Yes. Jiang Jingyi nodded. Since you're all up, go and help. Are you going to let Qianxue work alone in the kitchen? A few more people walked out of the courtyard. They were Ji Shui, Li Ji, Elder Wang, and Lu Yin. The person who spoke was Lu Yin. As he spoke, he glared at Yan Nanshan and Jiang Jingyi. Don't speak. Qianxue is a woman, and so are you. Look at how virtuous Qianxue is. She pays for all our 3 meals a day. Yan Nanshan glanced at Lu Yun and pursed his lips. What did you say? Say it again. Lu Yun immediately went forward and grabbed Yan Nanshan's ear. Can't I speak the truth? Yan Nanshan mumbled. Can the truth be said in front of a woman? Lu Yin snorted coldly and tugged at Ji Shui. Don't stay with these stinky men. Let's go help Qian Shui. Those who don't help are not allowed to eat later. Ji Shui shook her head and laughed. See, it's all your fault for offending them. If we really don't have breakfast later, we'll settle the score with you. Li Ji and Elder Wang glared at Yan Nanshan and Lu Yin. What does it matter? At most, we'll get some wild game. We'll have a few drinks when the time comes. Yan Nanshan waved his hand. That's a good idea. Li Ji and Elder Wang's eyes lit up. Yan Nanshan sat beside Feng Cheng and looked at the float on the water. Speaking of which, Ling Yunfei and Shuang, I haven't come to visit us in a long time. There's nothing we can do. Who asked them to have children? Jiang Jingyi shook his head. Don't you think time passes too quickly? In the blink of an eye, Xiao Hong and Lu Zheng's 2 children are already so old. Fatso and Xiaoyan's children are also adults. Now, even Ling Yunfei and Shuang, Er's children are 5 or 6 years old. They really have to admit that they're old. Yan Nanshan shook his head and sighed. That's right. Thinking back to when they were young, it seems like it was only yesterday. What left the deepest impression on me was that I brought Fei Yang, Yunfei, Shuang Qing Zhuling and that wolf cub to Pan County to compete with the young people there. Although they were still young back then, they had already revealed their talents. Jiang Jingyi sighed. That's right. It's not without reason that they can achieve what they do today. I just don't know if Fei Yang is alive or dead now. Yan Nanshan looked up at the sun and muttered, with Qin Fei Yang's brains and methods, will anything happen to him? A loud and clear voice sounded. The Black Bear King and his son walked out of a cave. The bear cub had also grown up. Its size was comparable to the Black Bear King. That's true. With Fei Yang's talent and personality, no matter where he goes, he is destined to be a dragon among men. Yan Nanshan nodded. All right, it's time to eat. At this moment, a dignified and virtuous woman walked out with a bowl and chopsticks. In the courtyard, there was a large round table with 10 wooden stools around it. Hearing that it was time to eat, Yan Nanshan and the others immediately stood up and walked towards the round table with a smile. My dear wife, thank you for your hard work. Jiang Jingyi walked to the woman's side, his rough face full of tenderness. That's right. This woman was Luo Qianxue. You know that I have worked hard. Why aren't you helping? Luo Qianxue rolled her eyes at him. I'll go help right away. Jiang Jingyi chuckled. It's already done. What else do I need your help for? Luo Qianxue said. Help me serve the dishes. Jiang Jingyi said with a smile without turning his head. Hearing this, Luo Qianxue couldn't help but shake her head helplessly. They're so happy. Not far away, the white-eyed wolf whispered. That's right. Qin Fei Yang nodded. They had been here for a long time, but they didn't say anything. They just stood there and looked at this group of cute people. Their relationship now is like that of a family. Sometimes even I envy them. Lu Xiaofei said telepathically. After all, this is the life that everyone yearns for. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, let's go and freeload. Freeload? Lu Xiaofei was stunned and hurriedly said, didn't we just eat at Grandma's place? Can't we eat again after eating? Qin Feiyang chuckled and strode towards the courtyard, saying loudly, Auntie Shui, add a few more pairs of bowls and chopsticks. Luo Qianxue was about to return to the kitchen when she suddenly heard this voice. She was slightly stunned. Why did this voice sound a little familiar? At the same time, Feng Cheng, Old Masterin, and the others were also stunned. They immediately turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. When they saw Qin Feiyang, the white-eyed wolf, and Lu Xiaofei walking towards the courtyard, they immediately froze. Feiyang? Wolf cub? This wasn't a dream, right? What's going on? Jiang Jingyi walked out with 2 side dishes. Looking at everyone's expressions, he also looked towards Qin Feiyang and the others. He was instantly stunned. Lu Yun and Ji Shui also walked out with 2 side dishes in their hands. When they saw Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf, their bodies suddenly froze. Qin Feiyang? The white-eyed wolf? Why were they here? Illusion. It must be an illusion. Old Master Rin rubbed his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang again. They were still here, then it wasn't an illusion. In other words, Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf were really back. But this was too sudden. He was completely unprepared. Crack! Suddenly, the 2 side dishes in Jiang Jingyi's hands slipped to the ground and shattered. The dishes also fell to the ground. It was also this crisp sound that woke everyone up. Feiyang! At that moment, a group of people ran towards Qin Feiyang. Ji Shui and Lu Yin also hurriedly walked to the round table, put down the plates in their hands, and quickly walked over. Feiyang, the white-eyed wolf, is it really you guys? We're not dreaming. A group of people surrounded Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf. Even though the living people were standing in front of them, they still found it hard to believe. The white-eyed wolf grinned and bit Yan Nanshan's arm. Then he looked at Yan Nanshan and asked, "Does it hurt?" "Nonsense, of course it hurts," Yan Nanshan said angrily as he rubbed his arm. "Since it hurts, it must be a dream," the white-eyed wolf said. Yan Nanshan was stunned. That's right. Pain meant that it wasn't a dream. Old Master, Senior Zhuyu, Elder Feng, Uncle Yan, Aunt Shui, Qin Feiyang scanned them one by one and said with a smile, "We're back." "It's really you, kid." Yan Nanshan immediately stepped forward, fiercely punched Qin Feiyang's chest, and said, "We were just talking about you just now, and in the next moment you brat appeared. Is this a special surprise for us?" That's right. We've been here for a long time, but we've been hiding over there. How is it? Is it a surprise? The white-eyed wolf laughed sinisterly. It's too a surprise. Yan Nanshan was so excited that he was incoherent. Chapter 2775. How could they not be excited? It had been a few hundred years since Qin Feiyang left Great Qin. To mortals, this was a few lifetimes. Although Yan Nanshan and the others were all cultivators and were not weak, they were now living the lives of ordinary people. Therefore, to them, a few hundred years was too long. They had fantasized countless times that one day, Qin Feiyang would suddenly stand behind them, fiercely pat their shoulders, and give them an unexpected surprise. "Everyone, I'm back." They didn't expect that at this moment he would really give them a surprise. It was simply unexpected. "It's good that you're back." Luo Chenxue walked in front of Qin Feiyang, grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand, and smiled happily. Her eyes were filled with tears, blurring her vision. "Auntie Shui." Qin Feiyang looked at the woman in front of him and couldn't help but feel his heart ache. In the past, when he was stranded in Iron Ox Town, other than Uncle Yuan, the person who cared about him the most was this woman in front of him. It was as if she treated him as her biological child. Sometimes, even her daughter, Luo Qingzhu, couldn't help but feel jealous. It could be said that during that period of time he enjoyed a long-awaited period of maternal love. To be able to see this mother-like existence again, he was extremely happy. "Don't let Feiyang stand there all the time. Lu Yin, hurry up and get a few more sets of bowls and chopsticks. Prepare to eat," Jiang Jingyi urged. Okay. Lu Yin came back to her senses and ran into the backyard. Just as she turned around, she quietly wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Yes. Sit here." Luo Chenxue pulled Qin Feiyang and turned to walk towards the round table. Old Master Rin and the others looked at each other, wiped away their tears, and walked towards the round table with smiles on their faces. "Grandpa, you guys are too much. Uncle is back, and you treat us like air," Lu Xiaofei complained unhappily. Everyone was stunned. "Rascal, usually when you come to play, I've never seen you be so polite to us," Yan Nanshan scolded jokingly. Hearing this, Lu Xiaofei rubbed his head and chuckled. As expected, he was not polite at all. He ran to the round table and sat down. After everyone was seated, Yan Nanshan asked, "Feiyong, White-Eyed Wolf, when did you guys come back?" 3 days ago, Qin Feiyong said. Yan Nanshan frowned and said, "Then why aren't you in the capital to accompany your mother? It hasn't been easy for your mother all these years." What a joke! How could giving birth to 7 children be easy? Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "I was in a hurry to visit you." "I'm really touched by your words. Why don't we do it a little?" Yan Nanshan took out a wine jar the size of a rubber ball from his chinkuan bag and grinned. "What are you doing early in the morning?" Lu Yun walked out with a bowl and chopsticks and glared at Yan Nanshan. "I'm just happy." Yan Nanshan smiled. "What's the situation?" Qin Feiyong and the White-Eyed Wolf looked at each other. There seemed to be something wrong with Lu Yun and Uncle Yan. "Uncle, you don't know. They have already—" Lu Xiaofei stuck out 2 thumbs, moving them up and down. His smile was extremely ambiguous. "Oh!" Qin Feiyong was puzzled. What did he mean? Lu Xiaofei was helpless. "Uncle, you really don't understand. You insist that I explain that they have already become partners." Qin Feiyong was stunned. The White-Eyed Wolf also looked at Yan Nanshan and Lu Yun in shock. It can't be. The 2 of them actually became partners? When Yan Nanshan and Lu Yun saw this, they looked a little embarrassed. "Haha. A single man and a single woman will develop feelings over time. We'll talk about it again. They're not young anymore. It's indeed time for them to find a partner." Jiang Jingyi laughed out loud. "No one will think you're mute if you don't speak." Yan Nanshan and Lu Yun glared at Jiang Jingyi at the same time. "All right. I won't say it. I won't say it." Jiang Jingyi waved his hand. Lu Yun put down his bowl and chopsticks and sat beside Yan Nanshan. He said with a smile, "Feiyong, I'm sorry for making a fool of myself." No. This is a good thing. I have to congratulate you." Qin Feiyong waved his hand and stood up with cupped hands. "Congratulations to Uncle Yan and Auntie Yin for getting married." "Good." The corners of Yan Nanshan's mouth twitched. "What's with your reaction?" Lu Yun pricked up his brows. No. Yan Nanshan hurriedly shook his head. "It looks like another henpecked husband." The White-Eyed Wolf shook his head. "Haha!" The moment that was said, everyone burst into laughter. Qin Feiyong also laughed out loud. He returned to his stool and asked, then, "Uncle Yan, Auntie Yin, what about your children?" "Children?" The couple was taken aback. "Since you are all together, you should be like my father and mother. Have a bunch of children and grandchildren. Only then will life be fun," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. "A bunch?" Yan Nanshan was so frightened that he trembled. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Forget it. We're all so old. There's no need to tire ourselves out." "You call this old?" Qin Feiyong was speechless. As a cultivator, he had to have a youthful mindset. Some people in the ancient world had lived for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. Didn't they still get married and have children? The White-Eyed Wolf said, "Auntie Shui, Uncle Yan, I heard you talking about Ling Yunfei's children. They're only 5 or 6 years old." "Yes." Everyone nodded. "That kid isn't good. Look at Lu Zhang and little Hongzi. Their son and daughter have already grown up. Look at Fatso and Lian's son. He can already take Lu Xiaofei to Fragrant Moon Brothel. His children are actually so young. The white-eyed wolf shook his head. Uncle Wolf, don't talk nonsense. Upon hearing this, Lu Xiaofei's expression changed as he hurriedly said, I'm talking nonsense. Didn't you say it yourself? The white-eyed wolf said, What did Lu Xiaofei want to say? But suddenly a few pairs of eyes looked at them in unison. Grandpa Rin, listen to my explanation, Lu Xiaofei panicked and said with a flattering smile. If the white-eyed wolf didn't say it, how could we not know? Tell me honestly, when did you go? How many times have you been there? Jiang Jingyi said. Don't be so scary. We've only been there once. Also, we just went there to eat and drink. Lu Xiaofei hurriedly explained, not forgetting to glare at the white-eyed wolf. Is that so? Jiang Jingyi looked at him unkindly. Lu Xiaofei nodded and said yes, yes, yes. If you don't believe me, you can ask Situ Feiyang. Who doesn't know that the two of you grew up wearing open-crotch pants? Ask him. What can you get out of him? I think you have to ask your parents about this. Jiang Jingyi said. Don't. You can't tell them about this. Otherwise, with my mother's bad temper, she will break my leg. Can you bear to see a good young man with a bright future being destroyed, just like that? Lu Xiaofei looked at Jiang Jingyi pitifully. Brat. Jiang Jingyi laughed and scolded him. He shook his head and said, All right, I'll let you off this time. Don't go to such a brothel in the future. Yes, yes, yes. Lu Xiaofei was overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. Then back to the topic. Ling Yunfei is different from Lu Zhang and Fatso. He doesn't like to be restrained. In short, he just wants to spend time with Shuang, or while he's young. If it weren't for his mother's constant urging, he probably wouldn't have the mood to have a child now. Jiang Jingyi looked at the white-eyed wolf and said with a smile, This is normal. Seeing that Lu Zhang and Fatso's child is already so big, Aunt Lu Ji will definitely be anxious. Qin Feiyang smiled. Lu Ji was Ling Yunfei's mother. Isn't that so? In the past, every time we met, she would frown and sigh. But now she's fine. Ever since Ling Yunfei and Shuang gave birth to a little granddaughter for her, she's changed completely. Jiang Jingyi said with a smile. Little granddaughter? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes, they gave birth to a daughter. Lu Ji is still urging them to give birth to a fat boy. Jiang Jingyi said, I really envy them. They can live such a carefree life and do whatever they want. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. What about you? How's your relationship with Xiaoyu going? Luo Qianxue asked. We're doing well. Qin Feiyang nodded. You're not married yet? Luo Qianxue asked. No. At the moment, I don't have such plans. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then you have to hurry up. Otherwise, when Ling Yunfei's grandchildren are running around, you won't be married yet. Luo Qianxue said. Wait for the next time. The next time I come back, I'll definitely invite everyone to my wedding. You should also prepare a gift as soon as possible. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Next time? Everyone was stunned. Old Master Ren asked, You're still leaving? Yes, there are still many things that haven't been dealt with properly. Qin Feiyang said. Is it important? Luo Qianxue asked. It's very important. Qin Feiyang nodded. Luo Qianxue wanted to ask something more, but Jiang Jingyi suddenly interrupted her. He glared at her and said, Why are you asking so many questions? You can't help. I'm just concerned. Luo Qianxue was dissatisfied. Just keep your concern in your heart. Come on, come on. The food is getting cold. Hurry up and eat. Jiang Jingyi looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Then I won't stand on ceremony. Qin Feiyang chuckled, picked up a bowl of millet porridge and wolfed it down. As he ate, he nodded and said, Auntie Shue's cooking is delicious. Luo Qianxue smiled slightly and looked at Qin Feiyang without saying a word. Her eyes were filled with love. In her mind, She couldn't help but think of Qin Feiyang from back then. At that time, although Qin Feiyang lived a life full of disasters, he didn't give up and walked all the way strong. Later on, in order to save everyone, he even sacrificed himself. Fortunately, the heavens were fair and didn't really take his life. Old Master Rin, Yan Nanshan, Feng Cheng, Jiang Jingyi, Lu Yin, Jishui, Li Ji, Elder 30,000 Zhang, and He Xiong also looked at Qin Feiyang with smiles. Although so many years had passed and Qin Feiyang now had unparalleled achievements, he didn't put on any airs in front of them. He was exactly the same as the youth from back then. He hadn't changed at all. Chapter 2776. After a delicious breakfast, Qin Feiyang sat in the courtyard with everyone, drinking tea and chatting. Feiyang, what do you want to eat for lunch? Tell me, and I'll make it for you. Luo Qianxue finished cleaning up the dishes and sat beside Qin Feiyang with a smile. Jiang Jingyi said, Didn't we just finish breakfast? I prepared in advance. Luo Qianxue said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, When I come back this time, I'll probably gain at least 5 kilograms. 3 meals a day. Every meal was very sumptuous. If this was in the past, it would be an extravagant hope, because this was the kind of life he yearned for. Forget about lunch. I'll go see Qing Zhu and the others first, then make a trip to the Sea of Despair, and finally go to Iron Bull Town. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. In such a hurry? Are you leaving tomorrow? Luo Qianxue frowned. Not really. I just can't wait to see them as soon as possible. Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's fine too. Luo Qianxue nodded and said with a smile, You can go to Iron Bull Town and bring Ling Yunfei and his family here. Let's have a good gathering. Okay. Qin Feiyang smiled and took out a jar of tea leaves. He handed it to Old Master Rin and said, Old Master Rin, try my tea. What tea? Old Master Rin was suspicious. Yan Nanshan said, The tea leaves that Feiyang brought back are definitely not ordinary tea leaves. Old Master Rin took the tea jar and gently opened it. A fragrant smell immediately assailed his nose. Immediately, Old Master Ren's eyes lit up. He looked at Luo Qianxue and said, Qianxue, quickly brew a pot and let me try it. Okay. Luo Qianxue smiled. After a while, the intoxicating aroma of tea wafted through the air. Old Master Rin couldn't wait to taste it and couldn't help but praise. It's indeed good tea. It's indeed not bad. Jiang Jingyi also tasted the tea and nodded with a smile. This was planted by one of my sisters. This tea tree is also extremely rare. Even in the ancient realm, this tea is of the highest quality. Qin Feiyang smiled. Younger sister? Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those sisters in the capital. I knew it. How could your sisters in the imperial capital brew such tea leaves? Speaking of which, how did you feel when you first saw your younger siblings? Yan Nanshan asked. Although it's the first time we've met, it's quite cordial. Qin Feiyang nodded. Definitely. Blood is thicker than water after all. Lu Yun nodded. Qin Feiyang said, I came back this time to do one more thing. What is it? Everyone looked at him suspiciously. I deposed all the martial marquis and even expelled Qin Li from the imperial capital. Qin Feiyang said. No way. Everyone was shocked. To Qin Feiyang, this might be a trivial matter, but to the people of Great Qin, it was an extremely shocking matter. Qin Feiyang said, Do you think I did the right thing? You naturally have your reasons for doing so. Regardless of whether it's right or wrong, we will support you. Old Master Rin laughed hoarsely. Thank you, Old Master. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. In my opinion, dethroning the martial marquis is the right thing to do. Look at these people. Great Qin raised them and gave them status and identity that no one can match. But what about them? Not only do they not know how to be grateful, but they also rely on their ancestors' contributions to form cliques and oppose us in secret. If they continue to cause trouble like this, I'm afraid that the incident with the Zhuge family will happen again. Therefore, it's wise of me to depose them. On the other hand, Qin Li, I know a little about this kid's ambition, but he's your younger brother after all. Isn't it too much to expel him from the imperial capital? Yan Nanshan looked at Qin Feiyang and said, 5 years. I'll give him 5 years to reflect. If there are changes by then, I'll give him a chance. But if it's still the same as before, then I can only give up on him. Qin Feiyang said, 5 years. Thinking back, you were expelled from the imperial capital by the emperor and even ended up in Iron Ox Town, where you were a cripple for 5 years. In comparison, he's still considered lucky. At least his cultivation is still there. Looking at it this way, you also put in a lot of effort for Qin Li, Jiang Jingyi said with a smile. After all, he's my younger brother. How can I bear to let him go astray? Qin Feiyang sighed. I hope he can understand your painstaking efforts. Yan Nanshan smiled. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and looked up at the sun in the sky. He stood up and looked at everyone with a smile. All right, I'll go to the sacred palace now. Don't go to the sacred palace. Old man, Rin shook his head. Why? Aren't they in the sacred palace? Qin Feiyang froze. Old man Rin smiled. They are in the inner hall of the sacred palace. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. The inner hall and the sacred palace were not in the same place. The sacred palace was in the state capital, but the inner hall was in the Tranquility Mountain Range. The Tranquility Mountain Range was the headquarters of the beasts in the spiritual state. It was extremely dangerous, and ordinary people did not dare to enter, and the Tranquility Mountain Range was adjacent to the Ocean of Despair. Then, let's go to the inner hall. I wonder how they are now after so many years. Qin Feiyang smiled. They will definitely be shocked when they see you guys suddenly appear. Feng Qing chuckled. Lu Xiaofei opened a portal, and the 3 people and 1 wolf walked in one after another. This little guy is getting stronger and stronger. Looking at the dissipating portal, Yan Nanshan shook his head and sighed. Yeah, his current cultivation is like a vast ocean, unfathomable. It's hard to believe. What level has he reached now? Jiang Jingyi nodded. Luo Qianxue smiled. No matter how strong he is still our child, right? That's right. Old man Rin nodded. In front of a mountain range, Qin Feiyang, White-Eyed Wolf, and Lu Xiaofei appeared out of thin air. Lu Xiaofei pointed at the mountain and said, Uncle, that is the Tranquility Mountain Range. I know, Qin Feiyang said. How do you know? Lu Xiaofei froze. Qin Feiyang smiled. I stayed in the inner hall back then, and the Ocean of Despair at the end of the Tranquility Mountain Range is your aunt's home. Yeah. How could I forget? Aunt Wu Shuang also said that when you guys entered the spiritual state, she came here to pick you guys up. Lu Xiaofei patted his head and said, She told you all this? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Of course. Aunts like me very much. Lu Xiaofei smiled proudly. Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's right. Back then, he, White-Eyed Wolf, Fatso, and Lu Hong crossed the desert from the Yan County and came to the Ocean of Despair. It was in the Ocean of Despair that he met the Mermaid Princess, and it was also at that time that he activated the purple gold dragon soul and formed the heart's knot with the Mermaid Princess. From then on, their fates were tied together, but at that time, he, who was blinded by hatred, hid his feelings and left the Ocean of Despair. When they entered the Tranquility Mountain Range, they found that it was surprisingly big, and there were ferocious beasts everywhere. In the end, they had no choice but to send a message to Ren Wuxuang. After Ren Wuxuang heard about it, he came to the Tranquility Mountain Range and brought them to the state capital. Although it had been a long time, it seemed like it just happened yesterday. Take it. The white-eyed wolf suddenly threw a pill to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong was slightly taken aback. He quickly caught the pill and found that it was an illusion pill. He frowned and said, "What? What do you think?" The white-eyed wolf sneered. "You guy." Qin Feiyong shook his head and took the illusion pill, slightly changing his appearance. The white-eyed wolf turned into a big black dog again. He looked at Lu Xiaofei and his sister and urged, "You two hurry up." Boring. Lu Xiaojia pouted. "That's right, Uncle Wolf. You're too childish." Lu Xiaofei also said, "You don't want to write? Then get out of here now." The white-eyed wolf said, "Yes, yes." Hearing this, the brother and sister quickly nodded and took out an illusion pill and threw it into their mouths. "That's more like it. Let's go." The white-eyed wolf chuckled and led Qin Feiyong and the brother and sister into the depths of the mountain range. Once, when they were still in the War King, it would take them at least a few years to cross this mountain range. But now it was only a few blinks of an eye. Even standing on this side of the mountain range, one could see the sea of despair on the other side. Of course, the white-eyed wolf did not use his extreme speed. He just treated it as if he was revisiting an old place. A moment later, a towering mountain peak entered his line of sight. At the peak of the mountain, there were many majestic palaces. This was the location of the inner palace. "It can't be, there's actually a statue here." Suddenly, the white-eyed wolf looked at the peak of a mountain. His eyes filled with speechlessness. "Statue!" Qin Feiyong raised his head and saw an eye-catching statue on the peak of the mountain. And the statue was none other than him. "I heard from Auntie and the others that the statue of Uncle was erected here to encourage the disciples of the inner palace, and to let them always remember that it was you who resurrected all the creatures in the spiritual state." Lu Xiaofei said, "Is that necessary? How great are you making it?" The white-eyed wolf was disdainful. "Uncle has always been great, especially in the spiritual state. Whether it's the beasts or humans, they all regard Uncle as a god. And as time passed, the major states began to imitate him. Now, all the major cities in the 9 states and 18 counties have statues of Uncle. During the holidays, everyone still burns incense and prays in front of the statue." Lu Xiaofei said, "Damn, is it that exaggerated?" The white-eyed wolf was shocked. "It's not exaggerated at all. In short, in the eyes of the people of the great Qin Empire, Uncle is the guardian of this land. They can forget about other beliefs, but their belief in Uncle has not changed even after hundreds of years." Lu Xiaofei said proudly, "His uncle was so great. As his nephew, of course he was proud." "All right." The white-eyed wolf nodded helplessly. After all, it was Qin Feiyong who sacrificed himself to resurrect everyone back then. It was normal for everyone to be grateful. Chapter 2777. Inner Palace. At this moment, thousands of people gathered at the foot of a mountain. These people were basically in their 20s, and their temperament was quite outstanding. Their cultivation was basically at the Battle Emperor realm. Why are there so many people? Qin Feiyong was surprised. The inner palace disciples were selected from the Holy Palace. Thinking back, when he entered the inner palace, there were only a few people. But now there were thousands of people. It seemed that the spiritual state had developed well these years. The white-eyed wolf chuckled. "Let's go and join in the fun." "Join in the fun?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. The white-eyed wolf said, "Pretend to be one of them." Qin Feiyong was speechless. Were they here to experience life? "Don't dawdle, hurry up. Suppress your cultivation to the 1-star Battle Emperor realm," the white-eyed wolf urged. "So troublesome." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Uncle Wolf, I'm afraid that won't work. Look, they are all wearing the Holy Palace's uniform. If we run over like this, we will definitely be seen through. Lu Xiaofei said, Do you still need to ask me for such a small matter? Hurry up and get a few sets of clothes. The white-eyed wolf said. All right. Lu Xiaofei nodded helplessly and opened a portal to leave. In less than 10 breaths, Lu Xiaofei came back with 2 sets of clothes in his hands. One was a long dress with the Holy Palace's logo on it. Not bad. Where did you get it? The white-eyed wolf asked. Lu Xiaofei said proudly, I have been to the Holy Palace more than once or twice. It's just a few clothes. It's a piece of cake. A piece of cake? You obviously went to steal it. The white-eyed wolf looked down on him. Didn't you ask me to go? Lu Xiaofei was stunned and said angrily, I didn't ask you to steal it. Kid, your character is not good. The white-eyed wolf shook his head. Lu Xiaofei was furious and roared, Uncle, look at Uncle Wolf. Get used to it, get used to it. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Don't dawdle. Hurry up and change, the white-eyed wolf urged. After Lu Xiaofei gave the clothes to Qin Feiyang and Lu Xiaojia, he stared at White-Eyed Wolf and said, Uncle Wolf, I find that you are really shameless. After saying that, he quickly put on the clothes in his hands. Lu Xiaojia also went down to the jungle and changed her clothes. Qin Feiyang also changed his clothes. Set off. The white-eyed wolf waved its claws and flew into the inner palace in high spirits. Very soon, 3 people and 1 wolf sneaked into the crowd without anyone noticing. Why is there a big black dog? Qin Feiyang's trio did not attract much attention, but White-Eyed Wolf was quickly noticed. Never seen such a handsome dog? The White-Eyed Wolf glanced at the man. It was a young man dressed in black. He was about 20 years old and had the cultivation of a 2-star combat emperor. Handsome. When the young man in black heard this, he was slightly stunned and then looked at the white-eyed wolf strangely. What are you looking at? The white-eyed wolf raised his eyebrows. I'm just curious. Since when did our holy palace have such a narcissistic dog? The young man in black was suspicious. That's because I keep a low profile. I'm not like you guys, who always jump out to make your presence known. It's as if you're afraid that people don't know you. The white-eyed wolf despised him. All right, I'll take it. The young man in black shook his head. He had seen many narcissistic people, but this was the first time he had seen such a narcissistic dog. Qin Feiyang looked at the peak of the mountain and asked suspiciously, Senior brother, what are we waiting for? Of course, we are waiting for the 3 temple masters. The young man in black said. Temple masters? Qin Feiyang was stunned. The young man in black looked at Qin Feiyang's reaction as if he was looking at a monster and said, It can't be. You don't even know the 3 temple masters? This, Qin Feiyang really didn't know. Seeing that they were about to be exposed, Lu Xiaofei quickly took over the conversation and said, The 3 temple masters are famous. Who doesn't know? It's just that we haven't seen the 3 of them with our own eyes, so we are a little curious. I knew it. Let alone the spiritual state, people in the other 8 states also know the name of our temple masters. The young man in black said, Xiaofei, who are these temple masters? Qin Feiyang secretly said. You will know later. Lu Xiaofei smiled mysteriously. Still keeping me in suspense? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Wait a minute. Could it be them? Suddenly, 3 stunning figures appeared in Qin Feiyang's mind. About half an hour later, boom! A terrifying aura suddenly descended from the sky. The crowd hurriedly raised their heads and saw 3 women standing in the sky above them. It's really them, Qin Feiyang muttered. That's right. These 3 people were Ren Wushuang, Feng Ling-er, and Luo Qingzhu. After hundreds of years, not only did the 3 of them become stronger, but their charm was also far greater than before. Greetings to the 3 temple masters. In an instant, everyone knelt on the ground. A group of men looked up at them as if they were looking at a goddess. Squat down. The white-eyed wolf pulled Qin Feiyang's clothes. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses and quickly squatted on the ground. Get up. It was Feng Ling-er who spoke. She was wearing a black outfit, as usual, which outlined her perfect figure vividly and looked extremely capable. Not bad, not bad. Little Qin Zi, you can think about it again. The white-eyed wolf nodded. Think about what? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Nonsense, of course, to marry her. The white-eyed wolf rolled his eyes. Get lost. Qin Feiyang glared at him fiercely, then looked up at Feng Ling-er again. Don't say it. Her exquisite figure was almost like a demon. This little girl was really becoming more and more attractive. Qin Feiyang looked at Luo Qingzhu and Ran Wushuang again. Luo Qingzhu was wearing a snow-white dress, which was spotless. Her black hair was like a waterfall. Although her figure was not as good as Feng Ling-er's, her temperament was different. She was like a fairy in the wind, floating in the dust. Ran Wushuang was wearing a purple dress. Her figure was exquisite, and her long hair was tied up with an exquisite jade hairpin. Compared to before, she looked noble and sacred at this time. Not bad, not bad, not bad. Little Qin Zi, you don't know how lucky you are. You deserve to be single for the rest of your life. The white-eyed wolf secretly despised him. Get lost. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Ran Wushuang was needless to say. He had always treated Ran Wushuang as an elder sister. Although Luo Qingzhu was interested in him, he also treated her as a younger sister. As for Feng Ling-er, in his impression, she was the representative of unruly people. He had been bullied by her a lot in the county of Yan. Of course, as for Feng Ling-er, he also treated her as a family member. He had never had any romantic feelings for her. This kind of relationship was actually quite good. There was no need to mix in other feelings. He also believed that the 3 of them would find their own home sooner or later. By then, he would faithfully send his blessings. A total of more than 3,500 people were selected this time, more than in previous years. This shows that the spiritual state's holy palace is getting stronger and stronger. Feng Ling-er looked at the group of people below and said faintly with a great pressure in her voice. The female disciples at the scene were fine, but the male disciples were all looking at the 3 of them with admiration. The white-eyed wolf stretched out his paw and poked the young man in black who had just spoken to them, saying in disdain, Hey, 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 you're drooling. Am I? The young man in black froze and hurriedly wiped the corner of his mouth. There was indeed drool, and he looked a little embarrassed. It's just a woman, the white-eyed wolf said. What do you know? Look at these men here. Which one of them isn't here for the 3 holy palace masters? The young man in black whispered. What? Are they here for them? The white-eyed wolf was stunned. Of course. Otherwise, why do you think people from other states would come to our spiritual state's holy palace? The young man in black said. What? These people aren't from the spiritual state. The white-eyed wolf was shocked. Of course, there are from the spiritual state and many from other states. The young man in black whispered. That's not right. Don't the other 8 states also have holy palaces? The white-eyed wolf was suspicious. The other 8 states do have holy palaces, but can they be compared with our spiritual state? The spiritual state's holy palace not only has the 3 powerful and beautiful holy palace masters, but also our guardian, Lord Qin Feiyang. The young man in black said with a face full of pride. Ugh, the white-eyed wolf's mouth twitched. How did this guy get involved again? Lord Qin Feiyang, the guardian of Great Qin, came from our spiritual state. Besides, he used to be a disciple of the Holy Palace, so people from the other 8 states all came here to admire him. The young man in black said proudly, "So half of the people here are here because of Qin Feiyang, and the other half because of the 3 Holy Palace Masters?" The white-eyed wolf said. "Yes." The young man in black nodded. "Look at you guys. I guess even Qin Feiyang's worn shoes would be fragrant in front of you." The white-eyed wolf was speechless. "How can you say that?" The young man in black stared at the white-eyed wolf and said with admiration, "If I really get a pair of shoes worn by the guardian, I will take it home and worship it like an ancestor." "It's hopeless." The white-eyed wolf shook his head. Qin Feiyang was also a little helpless. This was indeed too exaggerated. At this moment, Feng Ling Air said again, "But don't think that you can enter the inner palace just because you come here." "What do you mean?" Everyone was stunned. They were all selected from the Holy Palace and had been recognized. Why couldn't they enter the inner palace? The inner palace is the core of the Holy Palace and the place where talents are sent to the capital, so it must be stricter. That's why we came here in person. In other words, you have to pass my test to enter the inner palace. Feng Ling Air said. "What if we don't pass?" Someone asked. Feng Ling Air said, "If we don't pass, we will be sent back to the Holy Palace." "Palace Master, I don't think there was such a rule before." Someone questioned. "Yes, this is a rule that only exists now, and it will be maintained in the future." Feng Ling Air said, "Why did you suddenly set this rule? It's not fair to us." Everyone asked in a chatter. "There is no fairness in this world. Everything depends on your ability. If you think it's unfair, then you can return to the Holy Palace now, or leave the spiritual state. I won't stop you." Feng Ling Air shouted, her eyes as sharp as a blade, making people not dare to look directly at her. Luo Qingzhu and Ran Wushuang behind her looked at each other with a trace of helplessness in their eyes. Actually, they didn't want to set this rule, but there was no other way. There were already many people in the spiritual state, and these years young people from the other 8 states also flocked to the Holy Palace of the spiritual state. So now both the Holy Palace and the Inner Palace could no longer accommodate them. So they had to raise the threshold to enter the Inner Palace. And these years, the Holy Palace and the Inner Palace had been expanded several times, but it still couldn't solve the problem. A little more. Young people from the other 8 states came to the spiritual state, causing the Holy Palace of the 8 states to lose a lot of talent. The higher-ups of the Holy Palace of the 8 states, and even the mansion masters of the 8 states, had come to talk to them more than once. They hoped that they could reject the young people from the 8 states, but they were all citizens of the Great Qin. How could they bear to reject them? So after some discussion, they came up with this idea. Raise the difficulty of entering the Inner Palace and make them retreat. If they couldn't enter the Inner Palace, they might leave the spiritual state in disappointment and return to their state capitals. After all, with their talent, entering the Inner Palace of their state capitals was not a problem at all. Chapter 2778. As soon as Feng Ling finished speaking, the scene fell into dead silence. Leave? How was that possible? It wasn't easy to get to this point, especially the young people from the other 8 states. They came all the way to the spiritual state just to enter the Inner Palace. Because entering the Inner Palace of the spiritual state was not only a supreme honor, but also a great future. Because almost everyone in the 9 states knew that the 3 palace masters of the spiritual state were very close to the emperor and empress. What kind of existence were the emperor and empress? Not only were they the rulers of Great Qin, but they were also Qin Feiyang's father and mother. So, if they could enter the Inner Palace of the spiritual state, perform well, and gain the recognition of the 3 palace masters, they might be directly recommended to the emperor and empress. In this way, wouldn't they soar to the sky? Most importantly, there were rumors in the major states that the 3 palace masters of the spiritual state were all war gods. Why was it a rumor? Because in the past few hundred years, Feng Ling and the other 2 had never really fought. Therefore, their cultivation was only a legend. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd and looked up at Feng Ling with a smile. Palace Master, just tell me, what is the test? Feng Ling looked down at Qin Feiyang with a trace of surprise in her eyes. This calm expression, without the slightest hint of panic in his eyes. This young man didn't seem to be simple. Wait a minute. Why didn't she see this person when she went to the Holy Palace to choose? Feng Ling didn't think too much about it, thinking that she had overlooked this person before. I will personally take part in this test. After Feng Ling finished speaking, a terrifying aura burst out of her body and shrouded the stone stairs in front of her. The stone stairs led from the foot of the mountain to the top. Under my divine aura, those who reach the top will pass the test. Now begin. Feng Ling shouted. Divine aura, she is indeed the war god. Thousands of people were shocked, and the admiration in their eyes grew stronger. Everyone, let's go. Once we successfully enter the inner palace, we will be able to receive guidance from the divine god of battle. This is a treatment that the other 8 prefectures do not have. Immediately, thousands of people ran towards the stone stairs as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Let's go. The black-clothed young man also called out to Qin Feiyang and the others, and ran towards the stone stairs without looking back. Is running so fast useful? The white-eyed wolf pouted. How could a group of battle emperors withstand the might of a god? However, for it and Qin Feiyang, it naturally existed in name only. Let's go. The white-eyed wolf chuckled and ran towards the stone stairs. How boring. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Wasn't this just messing around? Let it be. Anyway, it was rare for him to come back, so he might as well let him play freely. Very soon, the people who rushed to the front stepped onto the stone stairs. Immediately, it was as if all of them were stuck in a quagmire, unable to move an inch. This pressure is too terrifying. How can we climb up? Such a thought immediately arose in the minds of those who stepped onto the stone stairs. No way. It's a matter of future and glory. Even if we have to climb, we have to climb up. One of the young men roared, gritted his teeth, and walked up with difficulty. The others also gritted their teeth and persevered, moving extremely slowly. After dozens of breaths, the person at the front had only climbed 10 steps. The others were all blocked at the back. Hey, get out of the way. Don't block the way in front. How are we going to go up? Someone was dissatisfied. The people in front were tactful. Hearing this, they retreated to the side and opened up a path in the middle, allowing those with good talent and potential to pass through. Don't say it. There were really some young people who walked up with ease. The potential of the people chosen this time is not bad. Luo Qingzhu nodded. This is just the beginning. Feng Ling said. Hundreds of breaths passed. Half of the people were still lining up at the foot of the mountain. Although everyone tried their best to walk from both sides of the stone stairs, the width of the stone stairs could only accommodate 5 or 6 people, and there were thousands of people at the scene. Therefore, they had to wait for the people in front to go up before the people behind could follow. So slow? The white-eyed wolf frowned. They were at the back. What's the hurry? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, glanced at Lu Xiaofei and Lu Xiaojia and asked, Do you have the confidence to climb up? I'm sure I don't. Lu Xiaojia shook her head. She was only at the war chief level. I'm confident. Lu Xiaofei pondered for a moment, then nodded heavily. Qin Feiyang laughed. All right, then let's wait and see. Half an hour later, everyone had already climbed up the stone stairs. There were more than a dozen young men and women who had already reached the halfway point of the mountain. Obviously, These dozen or so are all young people with good potential. Let's go up as well. Qin Feiyong smiled. The white-eyed wolf directly rushed up and did not feel any pressure. Qin Feiyong also followed suit and stepped onto the stone stairs. In an instant, he determined that the strength of this pressure was only at the War Master level. War Master? This probably wouldn't be difficult for Lu Xiaofei. This was because Lu Xiaofei was originally a War Master, and he had even opened the door of potential. Even Lu Xiaojia would be able to barely hold on for a while. After all, Lu Xiaojia had also opened the door of potential. So it's only SOO. After Lu Xiaofei stepped onto the stone stairs, a trace of pride immediately crawled up his face. He looked at the white-eyed wolf and sent a sound transmission. "Uncle Wolf, let's go!" "Haha, let's give your aunt a surprise." The white-eyed wolf laughed sinisterly, then rushed towards the peak of the mountain like a wisp of smoke. Lu Xiaofei also followed closely behind. "It can't be." In the air, Feng Ling'er and the other two stared at the white-eyed wolf and Lu Xiaofei with their mouths agape. It was actually so easy. "Are you guys perverts? You can still run so fast." The people on both sides of the stone stairs also looked at the man and the wolf in shock. The white-eyed wolf said disdainfully, "It's not that we are perverts. You guys are just too useless." "Brother Dog, wait, bring me along." The black-clothed young man was also on the stone stairs. When he saw the white-eyed wolf running towards him, he hurriedly reached out his hand and called out, "Scram!" The white-eyed wolf swatted at him with its paw. The black-clothed young man immediately staggered and almost fell from the stone stairs. "Brother Dog, don't be so heartless," the black-clothed young man exclaimed. "Is he close to you?" The white-eyed wolf glared at him, then ran up the stairs without looking back. "What's going on? How can a big black dog be so arrogant?" Feng Ling'er was stunned. Ran Wushuang said suspiciously, "When you went to the sanctum, did you see this big dog?" "I don't remember at all." Feng Ling'er shook her head. "You don't remember? Then is it from the sanctum? Could it be a ferocious beast nearby that came to join in the fun?" Ran Wushuang frowned. "It doesn't look like it. Look, it seems to be very familiar with that kid behind it." Feng Ling'er pointed at Lu Xiaofei. "Oh no, I'm afraid there are a few peerless monsters this time. Ling'er, take special care of them and see how amazing their potential is." Ren Wushuang laughed. "Okay." Feng Ling'er secretly laughed, and the pressure that enveloped the white-eyed wolf and Lu Xiaofei suddenly doubled. The white-eyed wolf stopped and scanned the pressure in the sky. Lu Xiaofei was also extremely stunned, and then swept a glance at the others. It seemed that there was no change in the pressure of these people. Immediately, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he sent a sound transmission. "Uncle Wolf, we seem to have been specially taken care of by Aunt Ling. The pressure they were now enduring had already reached the level of a war saint. "Special care!" The white-eyed wolf raised its head and glanced at Feng Ling'er, a trace of ridicule in its eyes, and then continued to run up. "Wait for me." Lu Xiaofei hurriedly followed. Although the pressure had increased to the level of a war saint, for him who had opened the door of potential, it was unable to stop him from moving forward. This really comes true. We're not even as good as a dog. Looking at the white-eyed wolf running up the stone stairs, thousands of people's hearts were filled with bitterness. That big dog glanced at you just now. It seems to be provoking you." Ren Wushuang chuckled. "Little bastard." Feng Ling'er's face darkened, and the pressure increased once again. "War King." Immediately, Lu Xiaofei's footsteps paused, as if his body was frozen. He was extremely dissatisfied in his heart and muttered, "Aunt Ling'er is too much." But the white-eyed wolf still didn't feel anything. "Brat, you can't take it anymore. The white-eyed wolf stopped and sat on the stone stairs. He crossed his legs and looked down at Lu Xiaofei, who was below him, and said proudly, "Aren't you just relying on your strong cultivation? What are you being arrogant for?" Lu Xiaofei muttered, "I'll go. This posture of his, look, this is also arrogant." Ran Wushuang looked at the white-eyed wolf. Feng Ling Er's expression became even uglier. Not only was he sitting there like a human being, he was even crossing his legs. Wasn't this blatantly mocking her? The pressure suddenly soared to the war god level. What a powerful aura, the white-eyed wolf immediately held. Lu Xiaofei was stunned. The thousands of people below also looked at the white-eyed wolf in shock. What was going on? Didn't it run faster than a rabbit just now? Why did it howl all of a sudden? This is the pressure of a war god level. Little girl, you're going too far. The white-eyed wolf stared at Feng Ling Er angrily. Pressure of a war god level. Everyone was stunned. Could it be that this black dog was specially taken care of by the palace master? At that moment, their faces revealed gloating expressions. Let's see if you can still be arrogant. Wait. Do you guys know why it's called the palace master? It seems to be calling a little girl. It seems to be a little girl. This damn dog, there must be a limit to arrogance. Everyone immediately glared at the white-eyed wolf. It actually dared to offend their goddess. It was simply unforgivable. The veins on Feng Ling Er's forehead were also popping out. It actually dared to call her a little girl? Interesting. Ran Wushuang and Luo Qingzhu looked at each other and couldn't help but want to laugh. That's not right. But suddenly, Luo Qingzhu stared at the white-eyed wolf in shock. What's wrong? Ran Wushuang and Feng Ling Er were shocked and turned to look at her suspiciously. If it was really imprisoned by the pressure, how could it be shouting there? Luo Qingzhu said in a low voice. That's right. The two of them also suddenly realized and lowered their heads to look at the white-eyed wolf in shock. You guys found out so quickly. So boring. I still want to play a little longer. The white-eyed wolf grinned at the three girls and slowly got up. He looked at Lu Xiaofei and said, "Kid, take your time. I'll go first. Don't take me with you." Lu Xiaofei hurriedly said, "You have to walk your own path. Don't count on others." After the white-eyed wolf finished speaking, he stood up and put his paws behind his back. Like an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life, he walked up step by step. He shook his head and sighed deeply, saying, "Invincible is really too lonely. Don't stop me. I'm going to beat it up. This damn dog is too pretentious. I've never seen a person who pretends to be so pretentious. No, it's a dog." The thousands of people below all gritted their teeth and stared at the white-eyed wolf's back. If it was a person, they could accept it. But a dog, damn it, wasn't it just teasing them? Thinking about it, they, the geniuses of the sanctuary, were really worse than dogs. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.